Great, thanks.
I just want to say that if I'm having a hack fest, I'm going to turn my camera off. So that way nobody gets to experience the drama.
Oh, Julie, you've been in the wars. Are you feeling any better?
Slightly, but it's a little annoying. And the doctors are just puzzled. It's not COVID though, because I had a test. So we'll see.
Well, that's one good thing.
Yeah. It's just so puzzling because we don't go anywhere, see very many people to sort of understand where it came from.
I think none of us have got immune systems anymore because we've all been in our houses for 6 months.
That's right. I'm blaming the dog. So just want to let you know if I turn my video off, just so that no one has to watch that nonsense.
Can I just ask, will we all be visible during a session that we're participating in, or only when we're speaking?
It's a good question.
It depends on the settings that both you and everyone has the choice of looking at everybody at the same time, or they will be looking just at the speaker. It depends on the setting that they have in the top right-hand corner of their screen. But I think the co-hosts may all be visible even in the multi-view format at all times.
Yeah. So we might want to turn our videos off when we're not in the session.
It might be
you can spotlight more than one in the new version of Zoom, more than one person. So
I can do that if you're having a conversation, if you would like me to do that.
I don't mind. Just saying it's the option.
Okay, I think everyone's in now.
You're still joining.
So Ewan, can you see David Harkin? Because he says he is now here with us. He's WhatsApped me to tell me he's joined us, but I can't see him.
I can see him, Ewan.
Yeah, I'm definitely here, promise.
Hey, good stuff.
I can see you, David.
David, I've made you co-host as well.
Lovely, thank you very much.
Andrew, I think that's everyone in. There's no one in the waiting room now.
Ewan, the International Council of Music, that is probably Silva.
Yes.
I just saw her coming in.
Great. Well, I think, Ewan, shall we begin? Okay, good. Well, welcome everyone to the Climate Heritage Network 2020 Annual General Assembly. To declare our Annual General Assembly open, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Elizabeth Erasito. Elizabeth is the Director of the National Trust of Fiji. She's joining us from Suva, Fiji, where it's an impossible hour of the day. And so, Elizabeth, your commitment to climate action is manifest from your willingness to join us even at this hour. And so, Elizabeth, the floor is yours. And you're on mute.
Thank you, Andrew. Nisam Bolivinaka, and welcome to the 2020 Annual General Assembly. November, it's a momentous month for us all. It's 5 years since the Paris Agreement and 1 year to the next UN Climate Summit. Will we be satisfied with the implementation of the goals of the Paris Agreement? Have we seen global emissions reducing in a way that satisfies us? What can be done to ensure the next decade sees the substantial reduction? We also celebrate the 1 year anniversary for our network. 1 year of advocacy and action for arts, culture, and heritage in the climate emergency dialogue. Andrew approached me last year to join the network. I was intrigued. As a custodian of heritage sites and an Indigenous Pacific Islander, I felt that it was important that I should join. The Pacific Islands are without a doubt in a state of climate emergency. The impacts of climate change puts at risk our culture, our heritage, our sense of place, and the traditional knowledge and stories of our ancestors. These are the building blocks to our strength, our determination, and the resilience of our peoples. Studies of traditional knowledge in the Pacific have acknowledged these systems as the oldest scientific records and observations of our peoples. The value of this traditional knowledge and cultural practices, when combined with science, helps to build our community's resilience to the extreme effects of weather events, which affects our agriculture, most importantly, our food security, our water, the coastal and marine resources of our peoples, and our infrastructure. I was particularly motivated by the support rendered through the network to enable our climate policy makers to understand the cultural dimensions of climate emergency. I was challenged by the need to remove the traditional boundaries of our segregated sectors. Culture, art, music, heritage, these shape our understanding of climate change. And as Andrew so often told me, cultural heritage is a climate issue, and climate is a cultural heritage issue. This year's AGA is dedicated to a retrospective overview. What have we achieved of our first full year of activity? The road to COP26, planning for 2021 in the lead up to COP26. CHN at COP26, identifying CHN membership, COP priorities, and the next year of our CHN membership. I wish to congratulate all the CHN members who have worked extremely hard to establish the Culture Climate Program, which is anchored today at the start of our Climate Heritage Week. This is a wonderful opportunity to provide a platform and tools to allow arts, culture and heritage organizations and professionals to regain our momentum on climate change work, especially in a time of COVID-19. It is therefore my great pleasure to declare the 2020 Annual General Assembly of the Climate Heritage Network open, and to wish us all an enjoyable and successful assembly. Vinaka Vakalevu, and thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for those words of welcome and your opening words. My name is Ewan Hislop, and I am co-chair of the Climate Heritage Network for the Europe region. And it's my pleasure to lead off on our session 1. We thought it would be worth having a look at a one-year retrospective and spend a short time looking at some of the successes of the network in its first year. And so in this session, I'd like to welcome a couple of network members to reflect on their perspectives and share with us some thoughts on how they think our sector can best contribute to climate action. And also, we want to have some interactivity and involve you, the members today, in giving us your thoughts and your opinions on climate action and culture. But first of all, I wanted to share a couple of my highlights from the year. And I think it's worth remembering that the network is only 1 year old, but we've come a long way in a very short time. I just pulled out some of my favorite images from my highlights. I think that what I think are the highlights for me for the last 12 months. Some of these include attending COP25 in Madrid, where amongst other things, the network launched its action plan, to attending the World Urban Forum in Abu Dhabi with UN Habitat, and many, many other high-profile events, getting our name and our message out there. And it's amazing to think that the network was crystallized only 2 years ago, back in September 2018, at the Climate Heritage Mobilization event, an official affiliated event at the Global Climate Action Summit in San Francisco. And I'd like to acknowledge the individuals who worked so hard to set that event up, to make it a success, and really start the journey to where we find ourselves today. And just over 1 year ago, at the end of October 2019, the Climate Heritage Network was formally launched in an event in Edinburgh, Scotland. And at that event, we attracted some fantastic speakers from all around the world. And we celebrated with 70 founding members that helped us get off to such a successful start. I've put a slide up here showing the 70 members. You may not be able to read that, but it really just does show the breadth and depth of talent and enthusiasm and energy that came together to help us launch the network. Those founding members come from across arts, culture, and heritage in its widest sense. They include units of government at local, regional, national level, Indigenous peoples organizations, culture institutions, including museums and galleries, universities and higher education institutions, businesses, arts, design professionals, artists, and NGOs, and a vast range of civil society. And our membership has grown and continues to grow rapidly. Just last week, the Climate Heritage Network Steering Committee approved another 27 new members, which to my reckoning brings our membership up to around 190, or just shy of 200. And I think that's pretty impressive for an organization that's only a year old. And so I'd like to thank all of you who have joined, all you members, and shown a commitment to the Climate Heritage Network and our objectives. And for me, I look forward very much to kicking off the second year of our network. So that's some of my highlights, but now it's over to you. I'm going to ask my colleague, David Harkin, who's going to introduce you to our first Slido session, because we want to ask you to share some of your highlights of the network with everyone in the meeting. So over to you, David.
Thank you, Ewan. Hello, everyone. You might remember me from previous Climate Heritage Network events as the person that pops up every now and then and gets you to do a bit of work. Nothing has changed in the year since we last met in Edinburgh. And as Ewan just talked through, there's been a lot to celebrate over the past year in terms of what CHN has achieved. But of course, Ewan's had the platform to share his highlights. Now we want to hear your highlights, and we would like to gather these in using Slido. It's very easy to participate. All you have to do is go to slido.com. You'll be asked to enter a code, which you'll see there on the screen, CHN 2020. Once you enter that code, you'll be able to contribute your own highlight. And we'll start to see some of them pop up on the screen. We do have a couple of other speakers in this session who will talk us through their highlights. So we'll leave this screen up for maybe just 30 seconds or a minute, get you all onto Slido, start sharing a highlight of your own, and then we'll move on to hear from others. But we'll leave this Slido poll open throughout the whole session, so you can contribute at any point. And I'll ask some of my colleagues to pop in the Slido instructions into the chat as well, so that once this screen is gone, you'll see how to get logged in. So there's about 80 of you on the call, and we've only had 5 contributions so far. So I'm hoping to see a flurry of them pouring in any minute now. Excellent, lots of lovely stuff coming through. Okay, I'll set as a target, once we get to 20 contributions, I'll then hand back over to Ewan, and I'll activate this poll in the background for you all so that you can keep sending in your highlights of the past year. Just a few more to go. We're almost at 20. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to move on now and hand back to Ewan. The poll will disappear for a tiny minute on your mobile phone screen or laptop screen, but I'll reactivate it so that you can continue to contribute a highlight of your own.
Thank you, David. And thank you everyone for contributing there, and keep on going. It's fantastic to see some of these comments coming through. They're really valuable for us in the steering committee and co-chairs to see. And just to give you a word of warning, we're going to make you work even harder later on in the sessions after the break with more Slido. For the rest of this retrospective session, I'd like to introduce 3 network members from across our network of arts, culture and heritage to each give us a few minutes and tell us about themselves, their part in climate action, what it means to them to be a member of the network, and what they think they can bring. So first up, I'd like to ask Mauro Gabriel Garcia Santa Cruz, who joins us from Argentina today. Mauro coordinates the Climate Change and Cultural Heritage Initiative, founded in 2019, and that organization delivers training and awareness in conservation of natural and cultural heritage. Mauro, would you like to say a few words, and by all means share your screen if you wish.
Thank you for the introduction. Are you hearing me?
We can hear you.
Greetings from Argentina, from the south of America. Un saludo especial para los participantes de habla hispana e também para os participantes de língua portuguesa. For us, it's a great honor to be participating in this annual General Assembly. We are convinced that the arts culture, and heritage have the potential to bring communities together around the common goal of climate action. In this sense, we believe that it's important to highlight the tireless work done by the International Steering Committee of the Climate Heritage Network, together with many of its members in the Organization of Climate by Culture. The different activities organized in the framework of this global event are a clear example of the synergy that can be generated from the collaborative work that this network promotes. La emergencia climática global y esta nueva normalidad, resultado de la pandemia de coronavirus, plantean un escenario crítico en el que ningún actor puede ser olvidado. Los conflictos que afectan a muchos de los países de América Latina y el Caribe suman nuevas complejidades al escenario regional. Sin embargo, estamos convencidos que la gran diversidad cultural de nuestras comunidades es la clave para poder implementar medidas de adaptación y mitigación frente al cambio climático basadas en el patrimonio. Por ese motivo, realizamos el documental Adaptación y Mitigación basados en el patrimonio, que se estrenará este sábado 21 de noviembre. Los invitamos a seguirnos en las redes sociales y a ver el estreno en YouTube. Nos encuentran con el hashtag Patrimonio, Adaptación, Mitigación. Também convidamos vocês a nos seguir nas redes sociais e assistir à estreia do documentário no YouTube. Podem acessar o conteúdo através do hashtag Patrimônio, Adaptação, Mitigação. The global climate emergency and this new normality resulting from the coronavirus pandemic pose a critical scenario in which no actor can be forgotten. We are convinced that the greater cultural diversity of our communities is the key to implementing climate change adaptation and mitigation measures based on heritage. That's why we made the documentary Heritage-Based Adaptation and Mitigation, in which professionals from different countries reflect on the global climate emergency and propose adaptation and mitigation measures against climate change. We invite you to follow us on social networks and watch the premiere on YouTube. Find us with the hashtag Heritage Adaptation Mitigation. Muchas gracias por su atención y buenas tardes. Obrigado pela atenção e boa tarde. Thank you very much for your attention and good afternoon.
Mauro, thank you so much for your contribution. I'd like to now invite Dr. Akandakar Malfuz-ud-Darain to give an intervention. Dr. Malfuz is Head of Architecture at Khulna University in Bangladesh.
Thank you. I think greetings from Khulna University, Bangladesh. My name is Akandakar Mahfuz-ud-Darain, and it is great to be here with you today. I guess most of you know this report prepared by CCHWG of Commerce. I strongly believe these words in these slides, which are stated in that report. Actually, Bangladesh is a unique example of social cohesion, where the people are adapt and build resilience to adverse climate action. And Bangladesh is actually situated in a delta floodplain, and this funnel-shaped northern portion of the Bay of Bengal and other geographical factors turns this region as a breeding place for many devastating cyclones and other vulnerabilities, such as salinity intrusion, sea level rise, and prolonged summer period. Situated in this extreme climatic condition, architecture discipline, Khulna University is working with Climate Heritage Network to exchange ideas and collaboration to heritage professionals. I'm also working with CCHWG on different issues, and I'm now working with CHN. And these are the challenges that we are facing in our country. So, and this is the action taken by our present government, Sheikh Hasina. And recently, our government and Ban Ki-moon, the GCA's chairman, they inaugurated their regional office in Bangladesh for Global Center on Adaptation. And here, Ban Ki-moon said that Bangladesh is a striking example of how vulnerable communities can be the most innovative in adapting to climate change. And our government is actually preparing a Delta plan for 2100 for climate actions. Lastly, my expectations to CHN is to develop a strong collaboration between researchers and heritage professionals to share technical know-how and capacity building to local heritage professionals. The local communities and professionals have an indigenous knowledge, technology, and age-old adaptation strategies. Obviously, these are our context-based solutions, and we want to improve those approaches with the help of modern science. I thank all the members of CHN to invite me to say something about my country and CHN activities of Bangladesh. So I really congratulate all of you to work in these global issues. Thank you for my taking this opportunity to give me. Thank you.
Akandakar, thank you so much for your message. And although there are some familiar messages in terms of what you're saying, I think a particularly strong demonstration of the urgent need for climate action. So thank you for that. Lastly, I'd like to invite Celia Fisher to speak. Celia is the Secretary General of the International Music Council, a new member of the network. And I know that Celia is a strong supporter of the role of intangible cultural heritage and the potential of culture to support sustainable development and climate action. Celia, I invite you to say a few words.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, climate change indeed concerns everybody. And when I first heard about the Climate Heritage Network, I thought what a great way actually of transforming a challenge into an opportunity. Because I saw indeed in the network a way to build bridges between organizations and networks that may not be very used to working with each other, as we come from so very different angles, such as industrial architecture or cultural landscapes, monuments, or performing arts organizations. And when Andrew approached me about the International Music Council joining the network, I immediately took it to my board, and which gladly welcomed the idea wholeheartedly. I should say I had a wonderful experience of such cooperation across the arts and heritage sector already in the past in relation with the European Year of Cultural Heritage. And some of partners in this adventure are, I think, in the Zoom today. I had the pleasure and honor to represent in the Stakeholders Committee our regional group for Europe, the European Music Council. And I actually continue doing so today as member of the European Commission's expert group on cultural heritage. I work for the International Music Council. So yes, I'm bringing in the perspective of living traditions, but also contemporary creations that are rooted in these living traditions or which are on their way to becoming living traditions one day. Climate change affects indigenous people who are bearers of these living traditions, as We have seen recently, for example, in one of the Culture and Climate Week panels a couple of weeks ago, migration caused by climate change carries the risk of losing traditional expressions. At the same time, I do see the role of the performing arts sector, and indeed notably that of the music sector, as an important agent in our common ambition to tackle climate change. There are numerous examples of how music festivals and music venues have started before the pandemic, I should say, to reduce their carbon footprint. At the International Music Council and notably at the European Music Council, we are strongly committed to facilitate sharing knowledge and good practices among the various actors of the musical ecosystem globally. My colleague Ruth Jacobi will tell you more about our actions and notably the EMC online series Climate Action Music as a Driver for Change at the Culture and Climate panel on the 27th of November. And before I close, I really wanted to congratulate and thank the initiators of the Climate Heritage Network and all those who have contributed to its success over its first year of existence. Happy birthday.
Thank you so much. I'd like to thank very much Mauro, Akandakar and Silvia for those messages. We really could not have three better advocates for the Climate Heritage Network, so thank you very much. I'd like now to hand over to my fellow co-chair, Julianne Polanco, who's going to introduce our next speaker. Hello, Julie, are you there?
Yes, hi, thanks. Thank you, Ewan and everyone, for your words, your inspiration, and your dedication to making this Climate Heritage Network a true collaboration. I come to you today from Marin County, California, and respectfully acknowledge that the land I'm on today is the ancestral land of the Coast Miwok people, many of whom today are members of the Federated Indians of the Great Rancheria. California is, as many of you, experiencing many different and increasing catastrophes of climate change and fires and floods in unprecedented levels in a way that really tells us that climate change is here, it's urgent, and the need for us to act is happening in real time. At the same time, we are all struggling with COVID and decreased budgets and times that really challenge us to work smarter and more connected and ways to come up with solutions that meet multiple objectives. I think for us, the development of the Climate Heritage Network and the opportunity to collect globally to provide these connectivities, to share and to learn as we are all moving in real time so that everybody doesn't have to start from the beginning, but that we can build up ambition and synergy together for greater outcomes is one of the major reasons why I'm so happy to be part of this group and with all of you. It is my great honor to be able to introduce to you Karima Benoon, who holds the Homer Angelo and Annie Berryhill Endowed Chair in International Law and is the Martin Luther King Jr. Professor of Law at the University of California, Davis School of Law. She has served as the United Nations Special Rapporteur in the field of cultural rights since 2015. In 2017, Karima served as an expert in the reparations phase of the groundbreaking Al-Mahdi case before the International Criminal Court concerning international destruction of cultural heritage in Mali. Her most recent report as Special Rapporteur for the UN General Assembly, presented in October 2020, covers issues of climate action, culture, and cultural rights. Her field missions throughout her career have included Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Egypt, Lebanon, Mali, Malaysia, the Maldives, Niger, Pakistan, Serbia and Kosovo, Southern Thailand, Tunisia, and Tuvalu. She can be followed on Twitter at UNSRC Culture. She is a great friend of the Climate Heritage Network, and we are thrilled to have you, Karima.
Thank you so much for that very kind introduction. It's really wonderful to be with all of you, and I send my warm cultural solidarity to everyone from Argentina to Scotland, from Fiji to Bangladesh. It's really just fantastic to be with all of you here in cyberspace and to continue our work together with shared optimism and vigilance in these difficult times. And this morning, as I'm listening to you, I'm very much remembering the words of the late, great Berta Cáceres, the slain Honduran indigenous rights defender, who said, "Let us come together and remain hopeful as we defend and care for the blood of this earth and its spirit." And it seems to me that your network manifests so beautifully that commitment that she called for. And on an ongoing basis, it is so inspiring to see how energetically and creatively you are continuing to work together, even during the pandemic, across regions and across languages. And so wonderful to hear the different languages this morning. I salute you and I thank you sincerely for all of this work defending the human right to access and enjoy cultural heritage in the face of the climate emergency. You are such important cultural rights defenders, and I am such a big fan of this network. I also owe the network a debt of gratitude personally, as it was your kind invitation to me to participate in your meeting in San Francisco in 2018 that led to my deciding to write my most recent report for the General Assembly, which Julie kindly mentioned, on climate change and cultural rights. And so many of your participating organizations submitted excellent contributions to that report, for which I thank you. You can find the report, which talks about the work of the network and cites many of the submissions from members of the network. You can find the annex to the report, which contains further examples and relevant legal frameworks, and all of the submissions that all of you and others made on the mandate's homepage. And I also tweeted them this morning and I put them in the chat. And I really hope that these can be useful tools in your work, just as your work has been so helpful in mine. I think those synergies that Julie talked about are so important. And I would be tremendously grateful for your help in sharing these tools. And as Julie mentioned, you can also follow the work of the mandate on @UNSR Culture if you're on Twitter. So what I want to do today is quickly share a few of the report's key messages, say a few words about how it was received in the UN General Assembly, and maybe a few ideas about implementation of the recommendations going forward to COP26. But first, hoping there are no technical difficulties, I'd like to share a video that I asked a 16-year-old Maldivian heritage activist named Mohammed Hisyam to make about the meaning to him of the threats to cultural heritage from climate change on his home island, to try to illustrate the themes of the report. And to me, his words are a really powerful reminder that human rights are at the heart of the climate culture nexus. It's about a 3-minute video, and I'll get that up in just a second. And it looks like, I'm not sure if somebody on the technical side can help me, that the other sharing things may have knocked out.
Give me a second there, Karima.
Sorry about that.
I think you've gone out and come back in, so you're no longer a co-host. I will just enable that.
Thanks ever so much.
Oh, no, you are a co-host. So you're still a co-host. You should be able to, the green button at the bottom of the screen, share screen.
Let me try again. Okay, there we go. Let me try quickly. All right, and there's sound. Apologies for the delay. Here we go.
It's working.
Meadow has been eroded by more than 50 feet. Assalamu alaikum. Greetings all. I'm Mohammed Hisyam, 16 years of age, living in the small island nation of the Maldives. I'm from the southernmost atoll of the Maldives, the city of Addu. My island, Saint Medu, has been a beacon of knowledge and cultivation for hundreds of Maldivian Islamic scholars and philosophers. We have a centuries-old cemetery where great scholars are resting, and Medu is a place of historical significance in the Maldives. Over the past few years, climate change and global warming has threatened our existence. Our country is the lowest lying nation with an average elevation of just 4 feet above sea level. With sea levels constantly rising, not only the tourism sector which runs our economy, but also the culture and heritage of this country with white sandy beaches are at high risk. For instance, the shoreline of Medu has been eroded by more than 50 feet over the past decade, and it still continues to do so. Some estimates suggest that the rising sea levels have already engulfed over 100 feet of shoreline in the past 50 to 60 years. Undoubtedly, this is jeopardizing our cultural identity. Our most valued cultural heritage is the centuries-old cemetery, as I have mentioned before, locally known as the Kogarnoga Burustan. Written history shows that the people who brought the light of Islam to Medu are buried in the cemetery along with the royals who once ruled the islands of the Maldives. Its significance is truly the history behind it and the love we have for the deed. It is with heavy heart that I say this, but as of 2020, there are approximately only 20 feet between the current shoreline and this historical antique. If no actions are taken soon, undeniably a rich historical masterpiece would just be washed away into the unknown. Not only that, but the British colonial historical remnants present in Naddo city are one of the key significant monuments in our cultural identity. The concrete remains of World War II battery still stands in the northern east point of Medu, which in the past was land. However, 50 feet have been eroded and it is fully submerged during high tide. An outsider might even say that it does not even exist. Piece by piece, our identity is being dragged into the depths of the sea. If these tragic events still continue, I wonder whether we will have anything left to pass on our cultural identity to the future generations. I, as a student and as someone concerned about the environmental crisis, strongly refuse to be relocated to foreign land to be labeled as refugees with no identities. My cultural identity is conspicuously important as yours and everyone's. It is high time that the international community commence to reflect on the issue of climate change and rising sea levels on a much larger scale. We matter. We have a voice. We are the children of the sea. The sea provides for us, but it is equally unforgiving. Please hear our voice and take action before a piece of culture from the world gets engulfed. दुनिया हुणु में देखड़ा एम्मे गुलिकें बड़ा बड़ा शुक्रिया.
So thank you very much for helping me iron out the technological glitches there, because I think that hearing voices like those of Mohammed, who is only 16 years old from Medu Island, is so important, and we need to do more to bring the world's attention to the voices and the stories of those suffering from and fearing heritage losses. And when I visited the at-risk heritage sites that you see in the video with Mohammed during my mission to the Maldives in 2019, I'll never forget what he said to me. He said, "I fear for the survival of my country, and no one, least of all a young person, should have to face such fears." And it was so interesting to me the way he was particularly preoccupied by the cultural losses that he knew were coming. And his words really made clear to me that urgent action on climate change is needed for many of the reasons that most people already know, but also to protect the cultures and the cultural rights of billions of people around the world, and to avoid the cultural extinction of the most vulnerable. And that was really my central message to the General Assembly in October, a message that was reinforced by things that I heard and saw on the ground, also in places like Tuvalu, where I also went on a related mission. And an official there said to me, "If we are not here anymore, what will happen to our culture?" And that is a question, I think, in the minds of so many people. So I really wanted to make clear to the General Assembly that even during the pandemic, the climate emergency remains, as you all know, one of the greatest threats humanity has ever faced, and is the leading threat to cultural rights, although there are also many others. It has to be addressed now with urgency. And I tried to emphasize to the General Assembly both the negative effects of climate change on human cultures and on the enjoyment by all of their internationally guaranteed cultural rights, but also the positive message, which I think is so clear coming out of your network, which is the positive potential of cultures and the exercise of cultural rights and cultural heritage to serve as critical tools in response to the climate emergency. And what I really tried to call for was a tripartite integration of environmental, cultural, and human rights perspectives on climate change in policy and expertise, and the creation of channels of communication and cooperation between policymakers and civil society in all three of these areas. And there were a few key messages in the report that were really essential to me to convey to the General Assembly, many of them messages that you all are working to convey all the time, but I wanted governments to be hearing them very clearly in that highest, as it were, international democratic body. And I think it's key to take some of these messages forward to COP26 in 2021. And I'll just mention them quickly. The first is really the scale of the threat that the climate emergency poses to cultures. And certainly many human rights are affected by the climate emergency, but cultural rights are particularly drastically affected in that they risk being simply wiped out in many cases, as Mohammed was warning with regard to his island. We may lose centuries of human cultural achievement, many of the cultural and heritage sites and practices that people hold most dear, and even entire ways of life. And this has not been adequately acknowledged in current climate change initiatives. So I think one of the messages is really how important that recognition is, and the need for adequate analysis and documentation, including a comprehensive mapping of cultural and cultural heritage damage, and the development of comprehensive strategies internationally for preventing and responding to it, building on work such as what you are doing. There's a very lengthy section in the report specific to cultural heritage, a section which was really enriched by so many of your submissions. So I thank you again, and I would welcome ongoing dialogue with you on how to implement the recommendations related to that particular part of the report. And I noted in the report that more progress has been made with regard to considering climate impacts on tangible cultural heritage than any other aspect, though even it remains inadequately recognized as an at-risk item, as it were. And I stressed, as I have in the past, that cultural heritage is a human rights issue, that it affects many rights, everything from the right to access and enjoy cultural heritage, to the right to freedom of religion or belief, to the right to education, and that all of these rights may be gravely affected by the climate emergency, and also that the effects really pass through time. So history and the past achievements of humanity are lost. In the present, people cannot enjoy their rights, including that of learning about that history. And of course, future generations will inherit these losses as their connections to past and to place and to practices are stolen from them by choices that are being made today. And so I really called for an environmentally conscious human rights approach to all aspects of cultural heritage, a message that you all have been carrying so importantly. I also said that sadly, some heritage losses are now inevitable due to climate change, but very much inspired by some of your submissions, emphasize the need to handle those losses in human rights respecting ways and to do everything that can be done to prevent others in the future. I wanted the state members of the UN General Assembly to confront both the scale of the challenges and their specificities. So I noted both that the climate emergency threatens humanity in its entirety and all human cultures. And I think it is so important to make that universal risk clear. But at the same time, to always be clear that the impacts hit specific peoples and places disproportionately, posing particular threats to the cultures of populations living in vulnerable environments, such as small island developing states, or the Sahel or the Arctic. And it was very important to me to make that point as well, and to try to emphasize that climate change-induced destruction of cultural heritage has particularly significant impacts on indigenous peoples for whom connections to land and ecosystems play such an important role. And so one of the central messages of the report is, as you all are continuously making clear, that we must be committed to climate culture justice as those most affected by climate change and who have often done the least to contribute to it have fewer resources to protect their cultures from its effects. And this could really result in much of the cultural traces of the biggest victims of climate change being allowed to disappear, while the histories of those most responsible are more protected. And to me, in the 75th anniversary year of the UN, this is completely unacceptable and a clear violation of the spirit of the UN Charter itself. And that was a message I was trying to make very clear to the General Assembly, and to insist that that body cannot be a passive observer of cultural extinction, and that what is needed is international cooperation and funding, partnered with local empowerment and participation. And I think your network is a great model of this, that those things are really essential to ensure that this cultural extinction does not occur. And I called for a human rights-based global action plan to save the cultures of humanity and protect cultural rights from the climate emergency, prioritizing the prevention of the cultural extinction of the populations living in the most vulnerable environments. And I also, after stressing these negative impacts, as I said, tried to really underscore that even as they are under threat, cultural heritage and cultural rights are powerful allies in the battle against climate change, that arts and culture are vital avenues for sharing information and mobilizing people and should be more fully integrated into climate action, and that cultural heritage and traditional knowledge are nothing less than climate assets and should be recognized as such. And clearly, as my mandate has tried to make clear over and over again, as you all exemplify in your work, culture, cultural heritage, and cultural rights have inherent value, but we must now also recognize their tremendous utility in our existential fight against catastrophic climate change. And this clearly means that we have yet one more reason to take cultures seriously, to protect cultural heritage, and to ensure cultural rights, because without them, we are at even greater risk in our warming world. And when I say cultural heritage there, I really do stress in the report the need to take a holistic approach, including intangible, tangible, and natural heritage, which are, after all, porous categories in many ways. I really tried to carry, as I wrap up here quickly, a message of action and the need for action. I met with the national librarian in Tuvalu, who heads the only library in the country, which is very close to the shoreline. And he said to me, you know, there've been so many meetings, there's been so much discussion, we really need action now. And that was the focus of my report to the General Assembly and my message on the day on October 22nd. And I hosted a webinar at which Mohammed's video was presented, and where Mary Robinson endorsed the report, and where we tried to brainstorm about actions that could be taken, and that video is available in the chat. And that event was very inspiring, and I was glad that I went to it, because the next day I went into the General Assembly, and I'll just tell you quickly before I wrap up what happened there. It was much less inspiring. There were only 7 delegations that actually took the floor. The General Assembly is on Zoom now, like everybody else, and so you're talking to diplomats who are in their kitchens and spare bedrooms. The only delegations that spoke were Russia, Cuba, Greece, Algeria, the European Union, the United States, and China. And unfortunately, not a single small island developing state was able to participate, probably due to under-resourcing of their missions. And none of the UN Security Council permanent members, Russia, China, and the United States, who spoke actually said anything substantive about climate change in the debate at all. Russia attacked me for doing a report on the subject, saying it was an exotic topic and that the tone was alarmist. The United States criticized China's human rights record, and China responded. And to me, this was just a perfect manifestation of the utter lack of leadership amongst the most powerful nations around the world, and the desperate need that we have for new global leadership on all sides of the world that really takes these issues seriously. But on the positive side, the European Union made a wonderful statement And please do, thank any EU interlocutors for this, recognizing threats to both tangible and intangible heritage, as well as the importance of protecting the cultural rights defenders who are engaging in the work in this area. Greece made a very strong statement aligning itself with the EU and emphasizing the question of accountability for destruction of cultural heritage related to climate change. Something I noted in the report is really essential. So going forward, I hope that we will follow up with those delegations that expressed support and seek more concrete engagement from them and support for organizations and bodies such as yours. And I hope we will work to challenge those delegations who were silent or who obfuscated. And this is really a huge task. And I had wished that day in the General Assembly that Mohammed Hisyam had been with me, or that those diplomats had the opportunity to go to Tuvalu as I did and stand at the place in Funafuti where the water is beginning to wash over the island at high tide, just a short distance from the only library in the country that is struggling to find the resources to protect its collection. And I think one of our key tasks going forward from here to COP26 is working to try to get those voices heard and ensure that those stories are told at COP26 and beyond as a way of really impelling the appropriate reactions and the essential engagement that we need, and making clear, as your work does again and again, that saving our cultural heritage from the climate emergency is a priority human rights issue. So I really congratulate you on your anniversary. I wish you luck in the year ahead. I am so committed to continuing to work with you and to doing so in a spirit of vigilant optimism. Thank you so much for listening, and have a good meeting.
Karima, thank you so much for your inspiring words and all of your work. And I think you are exactly on point about the need and the urgency and the things that we can all do to help drive these in our governments, in our localities, to bring climate heritage and the issues that are facing our communities globally to help raise their voices. So thank you so much. We appreciate you being with us today. We know you're incredibly busy, but we also appreciate the ongoing partnership, and we look forward to continuing that with you in the years ahead. Thank you. Ewan, over to you.
Thank you very much. Session 2 of our meeting is called The Road to COP, where we'd like to introduce network members to COP26, planned to take place in Glasgow, Scotland in November 2021, as we've heard. And of course, it's no coincidence that we're meeting today, 1 year exactly to go from the COP. And in this session, I'll be delighted to introduce a series of speakers to help us understand the priorities and the processes of the COP, really to help us shape our views on the contribution that we, representing arts, culture and heritage assets, can make to support meaningful climate action right across the globe. After the break in session 4, we're going to be exploring the COP themes in more detail in another interactive session using Slido, and where we'd like you to, from right across the network, to tell us what the wider membership can offer to help address the key COP themes and help the network prioritize its approach to our engagement at COP26. It's fantastic to see so many comments coming through the chat. Please keep those coming. You'll also get a chance to feed in through the Slido in the next session in a bit more detail as well, where your comments will be taken on board and help shape the network's policy. So keep it coming, please. Before I invite the speakers up, to start the session, I would just like to read a short statement that's been provided by Fiona Hislop, who's the Cabinet Secretary for Economy, Fair Work and Culture in the Scottish Government. Many of you will be aware that Fiona Hislop presided over our network launch a year ago in Edinburgh, and we're particularly grateful for her continued interest in the network. So I'm just going to read this short statement from Cabinet Secretary for Economy, Fair Work and Culture for the Climate Heritage Network, General Assembly, 16th of November 2020. As a champion of the Climate Heritage Network since its launch in October 2019, I'm delighted to have the opportunity to send you this message ahead of your annual General Assembly. Since my last message to you in February this year, much has changed. The COVID-19 pandemic has, of course, had severe impacts on the culture and heritage sectors in Scotland and around the world, which we've been working hard to address. However, the impacts of COVID-19 have also provided us with an opportunity to pause and think about how we want to rebuild and recover. In Scotland, as set out in our programme for government, this has led to a determination to ensure that ours is a green recovery, that we will build back better and stronger. To do this, we will focus on measures that will improve the well-being of our nation and help us to meet our statutory commitment to be net zero society by 2045. It is clear that the cultural and heritage sectors have an important role to play in delivering our ambitions. The valuable work that the Climate Heritage Network is undertaking demonstrates that culture-based strategies have the potential to spur behavioural change and community action through their ability to connect people intimately to the environment around them, and to give local and marginalised voices the agency to develop and deliver place-based solutions. Scotland's climate change public engagement strategy, to be published in December 2020, will outline the steps we will take to put people and communities at the heart of our approach to tackling climate change. This will include references to the crucial role of heritage and culture in galvanising action. Given its importance in showcasing these messages, it is unfortunate that another impact of the COVID-19 pandemic was to delay COP26. However, the focus on the summit remains strong, and I'm looking forward to a successful COP in Glasgow next November. As you know, this pivotal event must not only set the world on a course to a net zero emissions future, which is just and fair, but support the building of climate resilience at local, regional, national, and global scales. Conversations around landscape and place will be an important part of this wider dialogue, and the work that the Climate Heritage Network continues to pioneer to establish global collaboration across heritage and wider culture is exactly the sort of integrated thinking we need to succeed in this. I'm therefore delighted that you're using this meeting to develop Climate Heritage Network action and planning for the COP, and I look forward to seeing this work come to fruition. In coming together today, you're providing a valuable opportunity to consider how to lead meaningful change through our rich global heritage and encourage others to do the same. I wish you well for a successful event. Fiona Hislop. So I'd now like to introduce our first speaker in this session. And I'm delighted to introduce Matt Toombs, who has taken the time to join us today. Matt is Director of Partnerships and Engagement with the COP26 unit in the Cabinet Office of the UK Government. And Matt has responsibility for stakeholder engagement and the COP26 themes, which we'll be discussing after the break. If you want to know what the government plans are for COP26, Matt's the person to ask. So Matt, thank you very much for coming along today and taking the time to talk to us. Matt.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Ewan. Really appreciate you asking me to be part of this, and to Historic England as well for inviting me to speak. And it's great to be speaking alongside Eunice, he's involved in our COP26 Civil Society and Youth Advisory Council, as well as colleagues from Glasgow and Italy. I really enjoyed and struck a very strong chord listening to Farima in the last session about the real call to action, the urgency for action, and the immense impacts that climate is already having on small island developing states and other climate vulnerable countries. And that is one that, as presidency of the next COP in COP26, the UK certainly sees as a absolutely crucial priority. So, I mean, as we've already heard, the connection between climate change and cultural heritage is of course really vital. We know that climate change does threaten heritage both in the UK and all across the world. The climate effects that are already being felt affecting physical environment, but also practices, traditions, stories that connect us to places and to each other. And the rich diversity of heritage brings value to the climate change agenda by offering different knowledge, skills, and solutions. And we really must learn from this. And so it's in this context that we see the conversations around cultural heritage really cutting across a lot of different topics, right the way from emissions reductions to disaster response to inclusivity. And I'm really keen to work with the Climate Heritage Network to understand the opportunities in your plan of Madrid to Glasgow for greater involvement of arts, culture, heritage groups in COP26. Just responding to the challenge of needing greater ambition, needing a focus on action, needing to respond to the urgency, I wanted to just explain some of the different roles in COP26 that the presidency will be taking, the opportunities for engagement. And this is across a number of different levels. So at the multilateral level, across the 196 countries that signed themselves up to the Paris Agreement, one of the roles of the UK presidency will be to act as a neutral convener between these bodies to look to finalise the rules of the Paris rulebook. And that's the formal negotiated element of COP26, and is incredibly important to be able to resolve that in a satisfactory manner. The second element is then the national level, which is what underpins the structure of the national determined contributions, the long-term strategies, the commitments that are made by national governments to increasing climate ambition. And this is the important point 5, well, it's now 6 years it's going to be on since Paris, where countries have committed to come back and increase the level of ambition for the first time since Paris to their national commitments. And this is where we need to see countries responding to this. And the role of civil society and the wider community in advocating for the highest level of ambition here is incredibly important. We're pleased by the momentum that is being generated by the long-term commitments we're seeing from China and Japan and South Korea and others, but it's incredibly important this is then translated into near-term action over the next 5 to 10 years through nationally determined plans. Alongside that, we are looking to work with national governments on the adaptation commitments and adaptation plans, but also on finance commitments, so the core parts of the Paris Agreement. The other element which I want to talk through here is the commitment of the UK presidency to driving action. And again, as Karima said, this is crucially important from a combination of countries, business, civil society, academia, all on climate change. And these are the campaigns. I know you have a session on themes later on this, but this is, I thought I'd briefly set out some of the UK government's and presidency's focus across these themes. And that underlying this is a focus on support for the most vulnerable communities and countries already being impacted by climate change. So we'll focus on addressing the major shared challenges around adaptation and resilience amongst other areas. Here we'll be encouraging greater political ambition, the tools, finance, coordination, commitments to support practical adaptation and resilience action, and help to avert, minimise and address loss and damage caused by climate change. And this includes driving and showcasing on the ground action on adaptation and resilience, preparedness for and response to climate-related disasters, and increasing the availability and accessibility of adaptation finance. And we know that heritage plays a crucial role in fostering resilience. It reduces vulnerabilities to communities, including climate risk. And we know that we can learn from traditional knowledge from indigenous communities across the world on what works to address the challenges of a future climate. Other areas we'll be focusing as presidency include on nature, very strong connections here, be driving action to protect, restore and enhance natural systems, avoiding deforestation and promoting sustainable agriculture. And here a transition towards a more sustainable food systems and a renewed and scaled up effort to protect and restore ecosystems. That requires a whole of society effort, including national governments, critically with indigenous peoples, farmers, with scientists, conservationists and business on making sure to harness the energy of the younger generation. On the energy transition, we need to accelerate the global transition from coal to clean power, and we need to turn the corner on polluting energy systems and seize the opportunity presented by the rapidly falling costs of renewables and energy storage. We need to go something like 4 times faster in decarbonising the energy system over the next decade than we did in the previous decade. Connected to that is then decarbonising the transport system, and we need to double the pace of the transition to zero emission vehicles for light road and cars. We need all new cars to be zero emission by 2040. This is a significant increase in pace of delivery. And then finance, the 5th area of our focus, which underpins all the other areas. In order to drive low carbon and resilient investment, we want to transform global financial flows to meet the trillions that are needed to deliver the Paris Agreement and the transitions needed. In the end, that means every financial decision taking climate into account, right the way from public finance decisions, and we saw a focus on this last week in the Financing Commons Summit, bringing together all the public development banks, and also with private finance institutions, which we saw last week in the Green Horizons Summit, bringing together significant numbers of private finance institutions. So heritage needs to be respected and valued. I don't need to say that to any of you, but we're particularly committed to the links with Indigenous peoples. And the UK recognises that the meaningful participation of Indigenous peoples, their knowledge and leadership is vital to the acceleration of climate action. We know that Indigenous peoples live on some 22% of the world's land surface, but they're stewards of 80% of the world's remaining biodiversity. There are over 5,000 different peoples, 500 million in population, and Indigenous peoples are leaders in how to develop nature-based, resilient, effective solutions to climate change through their knowledge, innovations, technologies, and spiritual values. And that's right from the Sahel region in Chad, which Farima mentioned, to the Amazonian rainforest. They're at the front line of climate impacts, but they have traditional knowledge that is essential to sustainable climate solutions. So we, as the UK presidency, will champion inclusivity through the presidency and use our position to empower and amplify the voices of those whose views are often most marginalised, addressing their needs and priorities in the run-up to COP itself. So in terms of next steps, we're working closely with a diverse network of young people, civil society organisations, businesses, academia, to make progress on the climate agenda. And I look forward to continuing these conversations with you towards COP26. We'll be opening up applications to participate in the Green Zone, the COP26 Green Zone space in January. We've got freedom in how to run that space. We want to make sure that it's inclusive and amplify these kind of stories and voices of those most impacted by climate. And we've got a dedicated youth civil society team in the COP unit, as well as one focused on adaptation and resilience. We would be happy to put anyone in touch for follow-up conversations about how to be involved in the run-up to this important event. Thank you again for asking me to be part of this really important event you have now, and I'm really, really pleased to be able to participate.
Matt, thank you so much for helping us to gain an insight into the COP priorities and processes, and particularly for making connections with how culture and heritage can support those objectives. We really appreciate you giving the time to join us today. Thank you. Well, we should, as we know, have been in Glasgow this week. So nevertheless, we wanted to give you a Glasgow welcome, or a pre-welcome. So next up, we've got 2 speakers from the City of Glasgow. First of all, Torsten Hack, who's Director of Glasgow City Heritage Trust. He's a founding Climate Heritage Network member, and a City Councillor, Christy Mearns. So I'll go over to Torsten now to lead off. Torsten.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My talk today will introduce Glasgow's outstanding historic environment to you. I will give you a brief history of the city's development and show some examples of what survived until today. I will start with Glasgow tenements, followed by commercial buildings and a few examples of iconic heritage. I will then introduce Glasgow City Heritage Trust to you. Here you see James Barry's map of Glasgow from 1792. On top of here is Glasgow Cathedral. This is the high street going down all the way to River Clyde and the bridge. This is Trongate, the market street of Glasgow, and you can see that was the original 1792 development. Rich merchant who owned overseas plantations lived in buildings like Shorefield Mansion. They were surrounded by gated walled gardens. The tobacco merchant's house in Miller Street is one of these rare survivors. In 1750, Glasgow's population was around 32,000. In 1801, 50 years later, it had doubled to 77,000. The following 20 years saw a doubling again to 147,000. And in 1901, 100 years later, Glasgow's population had increased 10 times to 762,000. That is 162,000 more than live in Glasgow nowadays. And to give you an idea, here is the cathedral again and the high street going down to the water. Bridge has moved, and here's Trongate. And you can see this is a map from 1858, the development in the south, the development in the west, and also in the east and north. So this overcrowding resulted in dreadful hygienic environments and extreme poverty, as can be seen in Thomas Annan's photos from 1868. To combat that, in 1866, the Glasgow City Improvement Act was approved by Parliament, which allowed the destruction of large areas of Glasgow slums and the erection of new spacious tenements, like this one on the corner of High Street and Trongate, the two streets I just mentioned before. Another example, Kent Road, shows the first street-facing bay windows, which quickly became the signature of the typical Glasgow tenement. The city expanded, and why is it not working? There we are. The city expanded west, and tenements such as Charing Cross Mansion and St. George Mansion were built, as you can see, much grander. The tenement development reached new heights with Queen's Gate in the West End, lots of bay windows, and slightly more experimental in the new tenements in Fotheringay Roads in the southern suburbs of Pollock Shields. In the meanwhile, the commercial centre developed as well. Here we see one of the last surviving medieval archaic buildings by Robert and James Adam, built in 1790. Only 16 years later, we can already see cast iron shops and warehouses like Gardner's Warehouse, and Cardoro. We also see monumental buildings such as Union Bank, which is now the Corinthian, and the Royal Bank building. Charles Rennie Mackintosh built the Glasgow Herald and the Daily Record buildings. And international influences resulted in the Scottish Legal Assurance building and Art Deco buildings, such as the National Commercial Bank. I will now show some iconic buildings of Glasgow, all of which had repair grants from Glasgow City Heritage Trust. Charles Rennie's Mackintosh Queen's Cross Church, Alexander Greig Thompson's 1-10 Murray Place tenement, and the Willow Tea Rooms by Mackintosh. Glasgow City Heritage Trust was founded in 2007 and is a charitable company with a volunteer board of directors and 10 employees. We not only invest in building repairs and reuse of empty historic properties, but also directly support traditional skills training, heritage education, and community empowerment through the historic environment. This map shows the reach of our grant aid in Glasgow. And here are some examples. In 2014, the redundant south entrance to the Clyde Tunnel was turned into the headquarters of a maritime engineering company. The building had been empty since 1985. We also, in 2015, helped turning this empty harbor pumping station into a whiskey distillery and visitor center. Our traditional workshops and lectures are very popular, as are our guided tours. This exhibition, one of many in our office, saw 5,200 visitors in just 6 weeks. And this goes on and on like this, so I will pass on. I thank you very much. It was very brief, but I have only a few minutes before, and now I'm passing on to Bailey Christie Mearns. She's one of our trustees of Glasgow City Heritage Trust and councillor for the City of Glasgow.
Hi there, dear friends and colleagues. Thank you for the opportunity to say a few words today about Glasgow COP26 and the role that our built environment can and must play to address the climate emergency. It's great to be able to join you today, albeit virtually. We're living in very unusual times, not just with how we have had to all adapt and many of us sacrifice since the pandemic, but even more crucially, given the immense challenges our planet faces. With the next UN Climate Change Conference, COP26, coming to Glasgow next year, it's a huge opportunity for our city and for the world. It's arguably our last chance to do something meaningful about climate change, and the event will need to become a catalyst for radical change that will be so vital in the months and years ahead. Despite difficulties with planning the event, which the pandemic has brought about, I can reassure you that Glasgow City Council continues to work positively on arrangements for an in-person event next year. Tens of thousands of participants, including the largest ever gathering of heads of state in Scotland, as well as in the UK, will descend in our city, and the hope is that they will all commit collectively to the planet-saving action that we need. The location for COP26 will be made up primarily of two areas: the formal arena under the control of the UN and a more citizen-focused green zone, which will bring together NGOs, businesses and national representatives over the period leading up to and during the event. This area will hold the key to engaging civic society positively in the debate, and the important work that you are doing would, without question, have a powerful impact here. We're expecting a formal application process for a place in the green zone to be launched in the early new year, and I'd urge you to consider any opportunities to hold activities here in the run-up to the event. Now, what is Glasgow doing in the here and now, and what are the opportunities for the built environment to help address the climate crisis? In May of last year, Glasgow City Council declared a climate and ecological emergency. Stemming from this, a cross-party working group chaired by my colleague Councillor Martha Wardrop was set up, and 61 tangible recommendations were agreed upon. This is currently out for consultation, and we would of course welcome your thoughts if you can participate. Principal amongst these recommendations is a commitment for the city to achieve carbon neutrality by the year 2030. On housing specifically, the report recognises the need to improve the energy efficiency of the city's older tenements. Given how central these buildings are to Glasgow's unique character, as we've seen from Torsten's presentation, this represents both a challenge as well as an opportunity for Glasgow. As so much of our housing stock is very old, much of it pre-1919 and regrettably in a poor state of repair. However, if we can make these improvements to it for the sake of our environment, we can also preserve so much of what makes our city distinctive. And there are positive developments on this. A pilot project is currently underway in the south side of Glasgow to assess the feasibility of retrofitting a complete block of flats to Passive House standard. This work will be critical to rolling out energy efficiency improvements across the whole of the city's historic tenement buildings. And Glasgow City Council is also ratifying its policy on a circular economy. I'm particularly excited about the ambition to explore how we can introduce a formal commitment to never demolish another building. If we're to reverse the significant contribution of demolition and subsequent new build construction to our total carbon output, we must introduce this and encourage investors to reuse what is already there. The built environment represents a significant opportunity to avoid the unnecessary release of carbon emissions, to help us reach our climate targets, while protecting the special quality of our neighbourhoods and high streets for generations to come. I believe also that our communities can play a powerful part too, and they already do. Community-run services which support people the length and breadth of Glasgow are being saved, and with this, so are bricks and mortar. Communities have shown how much passion and vision there is to make better what is already there, not pull down and start again, which the market too often seems to want to do. In my own ward, an iconic B-listed former church building, the Pyramid, so valued by the local community, is going through this very process. Last year it was bought over by the community and is now being restored to its former glory, as well as renovated creatively to meet current needs. The Kinning Park Complex Community Centre, where I used to work, is going through a similar process, having recently acquired a significant level of funding, which will first and foremost address the leaking roof and prehistoric oil heating system, but also look in partnership with the artists and creative organisations which use the space at how to make it more functional and sustainable. It is also interesting in that it's a former school building, and sadly there are so many of these sitting empty in Glasgow right now, something again which we should turn into an opportunity. These are just two inspiring examples, but there are so many more. To help expand on this opportunity further, we need to provide the tools and expertise to communities to enable them to take on projects like these. By doing so, we can provide vital facilities to so many people without one, and will give new life to these former buildings. I'm sure you can make a significant impact here as well. As the host city of COP26, Glasgow is clear that cities are at the forefront of innovation and new ways of low carbon living. While nation states make pledges on these things, it is cities that actively deliver on them. Culture and heritage are key elements of the global conversation, and we are committed to making connections with our neighbours and city networks from around the world who are looking creatively at how to respond to our shared challenges. The built environment, the cultural and social environments, and biggest of all, the global environment. We need to learn to connect all of these and excel in each one, as nature has taught us that they are all connected. We have been a city of transformation once before, in the context of the Industrial Revolution. We must now make history again in the context of a green and much more interconnected one. Thank you.
Thank you both, Torsten and Christy, for those words. You've hit a chord. The chat reflects that very strongly. Thank you so much. Torsten, we'll be booking up for tours of heritage buildings, and particularly the one with the whiskey distillery. So bear that in mind, please. And Christy, thank you for your support for heritage, your long-standing support for heritage that we're aware of, and your ambitions as a city, which are exemplary, I think. And I can certainly recommend people read the recent Glasgow City Centre Living Strategy, which has got an ambition of doubling the residential population in the city centre by 2035. It makes connections between repurposing redundant buildings, high quality public space, and people's well-being. And I think some of the ambitions in Glasgow are just second to none. And I look forward to us all reconvening in Glasgow in a year from now. So thank you both for that. The next presentation we've got is from another great friend of the network and founding member, Armenia Scacciatano from Italy. Armenia is currently in the Minister's Cabinet in the Italian Ministry of Culture, but before that she spent 6 years as a policy officer for culture and cultural heritage and economics at the European Commission. So Armenia has offered to talk today a little bit about the pre-COP, because Italy being the partner country with the UK for the COP, and also some insight into a culture ministers meeting. So Armenia, please.
Oh, sorry. I don't know. Is it fine? It's okay?
It's there, Armenia. We can see it.
Okay. Sorry for the technical issue. So let me first congratulate with you for the organization of the Climate Heritage Network's first ever annual General Assembly in this critical, despite the critical condition created by the pandemic. So as we know, we will have the COP26 in November 2021, but there will be also another important event taking place in Milan in 2021, which is the pre-COP. This is because the UK and Italy have established a partnership. This partnership was decided at the end of the COP25 meeting which was held in Madrid in December 2019 in response of the UN's call for even a more ambitious targeting efforts to implement the Paris Agreement. So the UK and Italy already have a proven track record of working together to champion the need for urgent climate action. So here are some examples. They are member of some alliances for like the Powering Past Coal Alliance. Together they have committed to phase out coal power by 2025. They are members of the High Ambition Coalition. And so they are, both countries also pledged to net zero emissions by 2050. In this framework, the pre-COP summit, which is the final official ministerial meeting ahead of the COP, will be held in Milan from 30 September to October 2021. And the purpose of the meeting is to provide a selected group of countries with an informal setting to discuss and exchange views on some key political aspects of the negotiations and offer political guidance for subsequent negotiations. The conference will be attended by between 35-40 countries, representatives of the United Framework Convention on Climate Change Secretariat, the chairs of the subsidiary bodies of the convention, and a number of stakeholders. The roadmap of pre-COP26 will be unveiled soon, so stay tuned. Of course, there have been changes due to the different due to the pandemic and the fact that some planning needs to be fine-tuned in next months. But just want to stress that there will be a strong focus on the young generation at the pre-COP in Milan, because, well, you know, young people are increasingly demanding action towards more just, equitable and climate resilient society. So they are the ones which are boosting global climate actions. This is a picture that I took last year at our meeting in Edinburgh. You will remember very well this young generation really calling for action for climate. In order to place young people at the center of the debate, Milan will host a youth event, which is called Youth for Climate, Driving Ambition, from 28 to 30 September 2021. I think this is very important because we also have to think at the young generation of cultural heritage managers, for instance, which need to be involved in our discourse and our discussion. So during 3 days, around 400 young people aged between 18 and 29 from 197 member countries of the convention will hopefully meet in Milan to elaborate concrete proposals on the topic related to the negotiation process of pre-COP 26 in Milan and the COP 26 in Glasgow. So the first 2 days will be dedicated to working groups and the last day to a discussion between the young delegates and the ministers attending the pre-COP 26. And in order to engage the young generation, continuously to engage the young generation, we in Italy, we are organizing a series of meetings and of webinars involving the young generation in the discussion around several topics which connect climate and sustainable development. So these events happened since June every month. They are interactive, and the young people is also encouraged to exchange, to continue to exchange ideas through the social media. Just to let you know that the next meeting will be on the 18th of November, so in a couple of days. Here is the link for the registration, and the Minister of the Environment, which is the ministry in charge of the pre-COP, will participate at the meeting. Then another important opportunity is the fact that in 2021, we have a unique opportunity as UK and Italy will hold the G7 and G20 presidencies respectively. So in the past, Italy and UK have worked closely in the G7 and G20 arena to promote climate change, to build resilience and unlock sustainable finance, including for the world's most climate vulnerable countries. Accordingly, the UK and Italy have the opportunity to leverage the synergies on climate action within the respective roles as president of G7 and G20. and in the framework of the partnership on COP26. So this is why protection of the planet and climate action constitute the second pillar of the Italian G20 agenda, alongside people, which is focusing on reduction of inequalities and guarantee of equal opportunities and prosperity of people and society through the promotion of strong, sustainable, and inclusive growth. So, as you can imagine, Italy has a strong interest in also discussing the putting forward topic of culture, as we did in 2017 when Italy organized the first ever ministerial meeting on culture in the framework of the G7 presidency. In the G7 in 2021, there will also be a ministerial meeting on culture. And I'm also happy to communicate that climate and cultural heritage, climate action and cultural heritage will be one of the topic of the discussion. In addition to the ministerial meeting, there would be also opportunity for dialogue with stakeholders. And I can also say that, of course, the Climate Heritage Network is perfectly placed in this dialogue that we are wanted to establish, and I'm looking forward to continuing our cooperation. Sorry. Oh, okay.
Hey, Ewan, I think you're muted.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. Armenia, thank you so much for that insightful presentation. We really value your knowledge and your wisdom. Thank you so much. Finally, for this session, I'd like to welcome our final speaker, another friend and founding member and great supporter of our network, Yunus Arakan. Yunus is head of global policy and advocacy at ICLEI. ICLEI is the local governments for sustainability, the global network comprised of more than 1,500 cities, towns, and regions committed to building a sustainable future around the globe. And others will know Yunus as when he served as director of the Secretariat for World Mayors Council on Climate Change. So I'd like to welcome Yunus to say a few words to close this session for us. Yunus, welcome.
Thank you, Ewan. That's really a great honor, and also I'd like to echo congratulations to the whole CHN family over the unprecedented progress over the past 2 years. And I recall when we've gone through all these photos, how I was also delighted and honored to join you from San Francisco to Edinburgh to Abu Dhabi. So it's a great celebration, and I think today's agenda is also a nice opportunity to go forward and to look forward. Also in that sense, just recalled also my sense of the past couple of years. I remember in Edinburgh when we were in discussions of our, let's say, the scope of the network, that there was a discussion whether we have to have a constituency or not in the UNFCCC negotiations. I am personally, of course, in my connection is that I'm the focal point of local government and municipal authorities, which is one of the longest in the whole process due to the Earth Summit in 1992. It's a legacy of this process. And I was mentioning that don't necessarily, let's not squeeze ourselves to one of those constituencies, and CHN is its diversity is unorthodox nature of partnership is its biggest strength. And I think what you have been showing here and our agenda and achievements shows that actually this was the right effort, because this reality of today's world is that the diversity of partnership is one of the ones that will succeed in the future. So I think in that moment we made a good decision, and I'm sure we would be making more progress. Again, in Edinburgh, I recalled my presentation. I was discussing that this is the time for a discussion on culture. Maybe it could have been better, but it's the right moment. Sometimes you cannot plan for the timing, but the time has come. And I was saying that it's a culture of sustainability that we have to build, and we have to speak to the hearts, not just the minds, and culture brings this. And I think the COVID experience proved us in these difficult moments, it was not our bank accounts who helped us, but our relations with our neighbors, our relations with our partners, our relation with our communities that helped us to survive all these hard days and hard moments, and to succeed, to deliver, to manage the unmanageable, unthinkable, gave us all the world of the progressives and climate activists, especially, that we could think of the unthinkable now, because we managed to succeed in dealing, or at least to a certain extent, and now we can address the emergency. I think that's also the important. And over these couple of months, I was very happy that we had contribute culture, and cities was in the World Urban Forum. Beethoven Festival came up, and in the Daring Cities, we also have joined the Climate Heritage Network to the Daring Cities of the world as well. So coming to my proposals towards COP26, I'll just show you one slide only. That is, actually, it's our roadmap of the local and regional governments towards COP26, which is aiming to achieve a multi-level action COP, as the title mentions. And in that sense, I'd like to first of all put a remark that this COP process, as this is the 26th, it is a cyclic process. And over the past years until Madrid, we had, and this on the left part of the chart, which is traditionally what constituents are doing, showcasing, consultations, and this is American throughout the year, and then bringing the results to COP. And every year, the presidency has its own agendas. The one point I want to address is that let's be prepared that don't expect a typical COP, whatever happens in Glasgow. It will not be like the past. And in that sense, I unfortunately would maybe upset one of my colleagues from Glasgow, but my gut feeling is that I hope we can manage a physical COP, but it will not be in the scales of 20, 30, 50,000. Very likely, it will be a much shrinked COP, but with much bigger impacts. The world will never get back to only physical events. There will be a hybrid COP. And of course, the UK presidency is preparing for this. We don't know how the preparations will evolve, but let's be prepared that we should be able to continue this global mobilization even during the COP. But maybe some core representatives, some priority or ambassadors to be present in person in COP. So that's type of a management we should prepare for ourselves. Coming to the substance, in the multi-level action COP, we have made 6 elements. And the last one is to amplify global action. In that sense, I'm very happy to hear from Armenia about the possibility of having a cultural ministerial is really becoming a reality, because what we were saying, amplifying, is that traditional COP agenda is a very hardcore gray literature, which is ministers of transport, ministers of energy, finance. These are all governments which are, unfortunately or fortunately, are concerned that there's something coming on them, and they're always reactive. But there is a whole lot of governments in our national machineries, culture, urbanization, tourism, education. These are the government leaders, or let's say government ministers, in most of the time pro-climate action. And if we can bring these voices to COPs, and if we can make these ministries heard at the preparation of NDCs, I am sure we will reach to a balanced approach that climate action is not a danger or a risk, but it is an opportunity. It's a new way of building the momentum. In that sense, I think amplifying with ministers of culture is perfect. We hope from the experience of Climate Heritage Network, we can get lessons for ministers of urbanization. I must confess, we haven't made that progress as the culture ministerial. So let's hope we can help each other. Another and 2 last points. You have seen 6 agenda items. I want to save the big news for Wednesday, maybe even the week after, from Glasgow. You will hear from Mayor Aitken. She was with us, the leader of the Glasgow City Council. She was with us from Santiago to Kigali. And Glasgow will introduce a new concept which will speak to the heart of the culture community. This will be related to the industrial legacy of Glasgow. I'm very happy Councillor have addressed these issues. Glasgow just joined the Urban Transition Alliance with Pittsburgh, with Katowice, with other members of the industrialized cities, and we will come up with something important that will be very important at the agenda, that we will show this is also a new culture. There are cultural values that we want to preserve, but there are cultural values that we want to leave aside and leave in the past. And the connectivity to the oil and fossil fuels is a cultural heritage that we would like to forget in the new era. And Glasgow will be one of those turning moments that will be introduced. And finally, I think one important point is Marrakesh Partnership, Race to Zero. The Climate Community Heritage Network has created an immense success to create this Race to Zero sessions. And we have managed in the Human Settlements Action Pathway, there is a new discussion on 1.5-degree lifestyles, and I'm sure Climate Heritage Network can come into the process. We'll discuss more. And the action for climate empowerment, this raising awareness will be an issue in the future. And finally, this year, you also have managed, and we also have managed to have a new IPCC process, a new expert meeting coming up, and the results will hopefully build us be more ambitious and more evidence-based documentation that culture could be part of the new, the real Paris Agreement era that will kick off with the second NDCs. So these are my inputs to the discussion. I'm really, really happy to be part of this family. Once again, congratulations, and look forward to the outcome of the assembly.
Yunus, thank you so much. That's very much appreciated. And just leaves us in the perfect place for our next session, where we're going to start to visit the themes and how we can interact with our sector, with our sector. And thank you for reminding us the strength of the Climate Heritage Network is our diversity of partnership. I think that's a really valuable point to make as well. So it's very much appreciated. Thank you. So that brings us to the end of this session. I'd like to thank all the speakers for taking the time to give us their special insights into COP26 and helping us understand better those themes and priorities and the key areas for us to focus our activities and contribute to global climate action. We've now reached the end of session 2. You're being rewarded with a 10-minute break until we convene for session 3. Session 3 is titled Climate Heritage Network at COP26, and that's when we want to hear from you about how we can best engage. See you all in 10 minutes.
David, how are we for time?
Time to go now, Julie, I think. So I think you could just kick off the next session.
Great, thank you.
I think just go for it. That's great.
Perfect. Well, welcome back, everybody. We're now into our third session. And to capture this auspicious gathering, we'd like everybody to turn their cameras on and give us your best smiles. And we're going to take a couple of group photos. So if we could have everybody's cameras on, we want to be sure to capture us all together. David, are you going to call the photos?
I could do the screenshots, but you might need to stop sharing your screen just for a wee minute.
Okay.
Oh, we still see your screen.
Julie, I can do it for you. I'll stop it just now. The disembodied device says.
Thank you.
And then I think there's a way of having a view so that you can see everyone's screen, I think, or a set amount of screens. Okay, I've got it. So if everyone give me your best smile. Okay, and I'm going to do one more. So a nice smile again, everyone. Perfect. That's me. I've got a couple. So on to you now, Julie.
Great. Now, Ewan, can you put the photo? Can you put the sharing back, Ewan? Or do I need to do,
you should still have sharing abilities. So you just click on the green button again.
Let me see what's happening here. Whoops. There we go. All right. Thanks everyone for your patience with me. CHN was incubated, as we've discussed, in 2018 and launched in 2019. 1 short year, so much progress.
Julie, you're not sharing yet.
I'm not sharing.
We don't see it.
No, we don't see it.
You have to push the green button.
That looks like it's working. Well done.
Thanks, everyone. So more than 200 members, and in monitoring today's participation, we've been up to about 90. It's amazing, and thank you, and we're so happy to all be together. CHN is divided into 5 regions, indicated in the colors on the map before us. The regional co-chairs are on behalf of Mayor Pedro Palacios of the city of Cuenca, Ecuador, Sofia Arce, Elizabeth Erasito from the National Trust of Fiji, who provided us with a very beautiful welcome. Dr. Ewan Hislop, Historic Environment Scotland, who's been with us most of the day. Dr. Albino Japella with African World Heritage Fund, and me with the North American region. It's an honor, and I thank all of the co-chairs for stepping up and being part of this amazing group, for your leadership and the exciting work that we're doing together in the coming year. All activities will occur also regionally, so please feel free to contact your co-chair with ideas, thoughts, and activities, and information will also be posted on the CHN website. And now I get to discuss and go through with you our amazing Madrid to Glasgow plan, the immense potential of cultural heritage to drive action and support just transition by communities towards low carbon, climate resilient futures often goes untapped. You, our membership, our greatest assets with your communities are helping to flip that paradigm by emphasizing the role of Indigenous peoples, arts and culture, and heritage can play in achieving the ambitions of the Paris Agreement. The Madrid to Glasgow Plan, Arts, Culture, and Heritage Climate Action is the culmination of the participation of several hundred people, many of you, beginning in San Francisco in 2018, with more than 200 participants in Glasgow last year, and here we are today. This is our first action plan. It was released at Madrid at COP25 and the UN Climate Summit, commencing with a now 2-year based climate action culminating in Glasgow in November of next year. The plan aims to bring together cultural organizations from across the globe and across the arts, culture, and heritage spectrum, and unique partnerships united by a common commitment to accelerate action on climate change. And we're organized in 8 working groups as follows. Working Group 1 is communicating and connection between cultural heritage and climate action, is led by Sarah Crofts, the Institute of Conservation. Working to value and traditional culture is led by Isabel Rivera Colazo of the Scripps Institute in San Diego and Navin Piplini, Indian National Trust for Arts and Cultural Heritage. Work 3, making the case for use through better metrics for avoided carbon operation and embodying carbon, led by Lori Ferris and Mark Brandt of the Net Zero Carbon Collaboration for Existing and Historic Buildings, and Mark Huck of the California Office of Historic Preservation. Working Group 4, mainstreaming culture and heritage into climate planning, led by Andrew Potts of ECOMOS. Working Group 5, using culture to promote climate resiliency, sustainable development, led by Jordi Pascal of the United Cities and Local Governments Culture Committee. Working Group 8, coordinating cultural heritage, safeguarding, and climate action. Working Group 7 is supporting climate action by local communities and Indigenous peoples, led by Sawari Wongkong Q of Chiang Mai Cultural Arts and Cultural Center, and Queen Quet of the Gula Geechee Sea Island Coalition. And finally, Working Group 8, building arts and culture and heritage constituency for COP26, led by Ewan and myself. Here are the members of Working Group 8, and thank you all for joining with us. Participation is open to all members. So if you're interested in joining a working group, please do, and please contact your co-chairs or your regional chairs. The information on those contacts will also be on the CHN website. So today we're going to talk about Working Group 8, the Madrid to Glasgow Plan, and the aim to identify and connect cultural heritage with high-level initiatives towards greater ambition in a durable way that sustains long-term policy and planning and practice. It also seeks to position the Climate Heritage Network as an asset to help increase and advance cultural heritage in climate action. What I love about this statement is that it's positive, it's forward-thinking, and it's inclusive. And I think those are really the hallmarks of this network, including our diversity. Key activities include a mapping exercise to identify key areas. We've heard about those a little bit before, and create issue leaders, to create a manifesto to detail how the CHN goals at COP will aim to get CHN at the table, to get cultural heritage expertise by adding value to others' initiatives, to create a Culture by COP website and to promote it as the place for cultural heritage information and activities happening at COP, and to host messaging, to create a CHN events programmer for COP26, including our 3rd annual general meeting, showcasing this plan and coordinating the CHN member attendance. And then finally, creating a timeline from now to COP26 to include the key markers to help us sort of follow along and figure where we're going. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce you to one of our committee members, Rachel Rowley. Rachel leads the business operations team at the Museums Galleries Scotland with a focus on organizational resilience. Her specific interest is in creating opportunities for innovation, positive behavioral change, and digital transformation. Rachel previously spent 15 years within the construction sector before starting her journey with cultural heritage at MGS 5 years ago. Rachel is here to tell us about what inspires her to assist with the Culture at COP website. And thank you, Rachel, for being with us. I turn it to you.
Thanks, Julie, you and Andrew and everyone. It's wonderful to be here. And I suppose this is an exciting time for all of us, but particularly me, because I get to talk about how I can be involved with the network and bring, I suppose, some of our Scottish museums into the fold, which is incredibly exciting. So I'll not take up too much time, but one of the things I was really inspired about was just getting involved, and how can Museums Galleries Scotland and bring our skills to this network at all. And one of the things I was delighted about was that the need for a COP website, and I thought absolutely we can help with that. So I'm just going to start sharing my screen a second, see if this works here. Let me know. Can you see that?
Yep, we can see that.
Great. Okay, fantastic. So one of the things that popped up was the desire to have this website to be able to share all of the events and activities that might be happening on the build up to COP and during COP itself. And we actually had sort of an underutilized digital resource in an old website for what used to be our festival museums website. So I saw an opportunity there and spoke to Ewan and said, do you think I have something here? And he said, why not? Let's give this a go. So really the aim of the website here is to, it's really important to me actually to manage the needs of the network, to share the events and other activities around COP and climate action, but it has to be dynamic and really accessible. One of the things, obviously, there's huge amounts of activity globally, obviously, going on. And it's really important to me that we can create a space where that is available to all people. Working collaboratively across the network, but also those climate culture communities. I mean, it spans, as we said, across the world, but also in terms of small climate groups, community-based activities, but also right up to the network itself. So the other thing that's really important to me, as I said, there is opportunities for space for the website. This has to be something that the network can use to really communicate policy change. The COP itself is obviously, hugely important for Scotland as well. So that's something that we need to consider. But community participation, civic action is really something that the site can be used for as well. So we'll be working with Working Group 8 to widen this out to the network as a whole, but also culture and communities as a whole. So this will be a space for people to share all sorts of events, but really to make it easy for people to access them. As we've spoken about there, we're not quite sure what format COP will take. Hopefully there will be a physical presence, but absolutely there'll be a more digital space to be filled. So hopefully the website will support with that as well. So in general, it should hopefully be live at the beginning of next year. So we're able to build in content and really capture all the stuff that's happening at the start of next year as well. So I'm really looking forward to it, and there'll be other opportunities to participate as we go along. But that's it. I won't take up too much more space. But thanks everybody. Really excited about it.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I'm going to try and share my screen again. That's so exciting, and I can't wait to get it populated and get it going and really make it such a strong tool for all of us and for our communities and for people to come and see what culture and climate action is all about. Next, as many of you are aware, the mapping exercise SurveyMonkey was launched a week or so ago. There are several questions that relate to key event, to the 11 key themes for which your input and comments are desired and critical. This is a network of people, and it's a network of networks. And we really encourage you all to share, contribute, give us your ideas and thoughts, and help us refine and define the conversations that we have going forward. It is my pleasure to welcome someone with whom you're all familiar, our illustrious Secretary, Andrew Potts. Andrew is the coordinator of the Climate Change and Heritage Working Group for the International Council on Monuments and Sites, ICOMOS, which works on a variety of initiatives in line with its view that heritage constitutes an invaluable repository of information and strategies to address climate change, even while those resources must also be safeguarded from climate impacts. He previously served as the ICOMOS focal point for the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Potts practiced law for 20 years with a specialty in financing for sustainable development. He holds a Juris Doctor degree from Indiana University. He was formerly an Associate General Counsel for the National Trust for Historic Preservation and received its John H. Chafee Trustees Awards for Outstanding Achievement in Public Policy in 2018. We know him as our leader and our inspire and our airmays. Andrew, please take it away.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Julie, for that kind introduction. As you all heard, my name is Andrew Potts, and I have the pleasure of serving as the coordinator of the Secretariat for the Climate Heritage Network. Just as a personal note, I have to tell you that I think this meeting has been amazing. Huge kudos to Julie and to you and our co-chairs, and for the team at Historic Environment Scotland and California Office of Historic Preservation for pulling this off. The energy is good, the content is amazing, the topic is urgent. This is going to be my pick-me-up for the year, I think. And also, what a great way to launch Climate Heritage Week 2020. This is the first of almost a dozen events we will have this whole week, and what a great way to start. Well, I've been asked to talk about climate policy, and for those of you that know me well, you know that this is one of my favorite things to talk about. One of the founding missions of the Climate Heritage Network was to provide a cultural perspective to the global climate policy making by connecting arts, culture, and heritage organizations to global climate policy processes. And I know for many organizations, this is one of the main attractions of the network. This is why they joined. They wanted a way to tap into and coordinate on advocacy and policy around the role of arts, culture, and heritage in climate action. But I also hear from some other organizations a different view. Sometimes people will say to me, oh, Andrew, you know, our organization, we don't really do advocacy, at least not at an international level. We're really a grassroots organization. We're focused at working in communities. We're focused on projects on the ground. And I just want to share a response to that reflection. And that is to say that in my experience, policy making really has the grassroots at its heart. Policy making roughly goes this way. First, you find people on the ground who are doing great work, who are doing new and interesting things. Then you link them together. And then you try to lift up some best practices and winning strategies from that work. And you contribute those strategies to make a broader, more general framework. That's the policy. And then you take that back to the grassroots to help people do more. And so people at the grassroots are really at the beginning, the middle, and the end of the policy process. And so we do have a focus on climate policy at the Climate Heritage Network, but if it ever feels like that work is disconnected from the work the members are doing, from the work you're doing on the ground, then let us know, because that means we're not doing it right. So how do we go about contributing a cultural perspective to global climate policy making? That's really a key question as we start the one-year countdown to COP26, which is the signature most important event in climate policy making on the global calendar. We have a year. Julie mentioned one of the strategies we're using, which is a membership survey that we launched using SurveyMonkey. That survey asks all the members of the Climate Heritage Network to indicate their own policy priorities and interests, and to let us know if they'd be interested in being part of teams that will pursue those policy priorities. And so if you have not filled out that survey yet, please do so. I'm going to post the link in the chat momentarily. There's still plenty of time to do so. We asked folks to do it in advance of this call so that we could get some early information, and about 20% of CHN members did that. So thank you to those. And now for the rest of you, please go ahead and complete the survey. So the survey really tells us what each member, each group has as their own priority. But at the same time, we want to start to build a shared vision of this. What are our collective priorities? What's the vocabulary and what's the arguments that we kind of all agree are the best ones to take forward to policymakers? And that's really what we're going to focus on for the next 30 minutes or so. We want to find out from you what you think are the best arguments, the key points, the remit of arts, culture, and heritage when it comes to many of the key issues on the global climate policy agenda. So the way this is going to work, I'm going to team up with David Harkin from Historic Environment Scotland, and we're going to walk through about 10 policy topics. We've been listening closely to people like Eunice Ericon and other experts like the UK government, trying to understand what are the most important topical, relevant, timely issues in the global policy agenda. And so we've distilled a list of 11 of those. It's not everything. There's other ways to describe the policy agenda, but we think it's a pretty good summary of it. And we're going to walk through each of those 11. And I'm going to, we're going to show a slide and give a very brief description of what the issue is. And then for most of them, not all, because we don't have time to do all, but for most of them, we're then going to open a Slido poll on that topic. And we're going to ask you to answer a very simple question. This does not require any homework. We're going to ask you in a word or short phrase to say what you think best describes the contribution arts, culture, and heritage can make to that theme. What's our best argument? What's our most important point? What's our remit? What's our elevator pitch in terms of the way arts, culture, and heritage intersects with that theme? It's just a quick off-the-cuff impression from you. We're going to move quickly, get through all 11 in under a half an hour. We really just want to start to first get you thinking about these issues, start to get some initial feedback from you on your perspectives on these topics. But just as importantly, because of the Slido technology, all of you will be able to see other people's views too. And we want to start to build a community of interest and advocacy community around some shared perspectives. So we have to start by seeing what our commonalities are. So with that lead up, David, are you at your ready?
Yep, we're good to go. So
Okay.
to take part, everyone, you just need to go to the website, sly.do, enter CHN 2020 is the code, and then you're good to go. And I'll ask someone who's not me to put that into the chat as well, because if I can't put it into the chat right now.
So in another window, go to sli.do and then enter the code CHN 2020, and you will start to see our Slido questions. There we go. David, you want to move to the first one? So you already heard from Matt Toombs and Eunice and others about these nationally determined contributions, NDCs. This is really going to be a key topic at the COPs. In the interest of time, we're not going to Slido poll you on this topic, and there are a few others we won't poll you on to save time. But I want to raise it in this group because it is something that we're going to be talking a lot about over the next year. The way the Paris Agreement works, each country is allowed to come up with its own list of activities it's going to contribute towards meeting the Paris Agreement targets. So a Paris Agreement target, for example, is to hold global warming well below 2 degrees Celsius. And each country gets to come up with its own list of the contributions it will make. And that list is called an NDC, Nationally Determined Contribution. All the countries of the world submitted a list of contributions back in 2015 when the Paris Agreement was finalized. And then they agreed they would submit a new round, a new list 5 years later in 2020. And unbelievably, it's now 5 years. We're at the 5th anniversary of the Paris Agreement, and those NDCs are due in a few weeks. The problem is we're already seeing that when we add up all the contributions countries are contributing, they fall short. It's not enough activity to actually meet the Paris Agreement targets. And another problem is if you read them, these countries, all your countries, my country, almost, well, my country is probably not going to do one, but the rest of you, they almost always fail to miss culture as a tool in climate action. So on the one hand, they don't deliver enough action. And on the other hand, they completely miss an important one. So in the coming year, a focus is going to be how culture can drive more ambition in NDCs and how we can get culture-based solutions into those NDCs. Okay, we're not going to poll on this one though. So next one. Okay, we are going to poll on this energy transition. So you already heard from Matt Toombs that energy transition is a huge topic. We need to use less energy, and we need that the energy we use is green. And so the question for you all, and we're opening the Slido poll on this now, is in one word or short phrase, what do you think best describes the contribution arts, culture, and heritage can make to energy transition? There's a lot of possibilities here. You might be thinking of the way cultural institutions can showcase energy efficiency in the way they run their institutions. You might be thinking of the cultural role in behavior change and how much energy each person uses. You might be thinking of the traditional knowledge about energy making, like hydro. You might be thinking about facilitating wind farms and sensitively siting transmission lines in landscapes, historic building retrofits. Yeah, lots. So just top of mind, when I say to you, the theme of energy transition, what do you think is a leading contribution arts, culture, and heritage can make to this key COP theme? We're going to leave this open for just a total of 2 minutes, 1 minute, David, and then we'll move on to the next one.
I'll just add, Andrew, just for everyone's benefit, that you can submit multiple comments as well. So if you do start to see something coming through and you think that is a good idea, you can go back, you can resubmit that, and then it will start to bring to the fore the ones that the group feels are the most pertinent. So submit as many as you like.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of good ones. I always learn from everyone else, and the things people come with are not what I would have led with. And so it's one of the amazing things about this diverse network. Okay, David, maybe we'll move on. Okay, closely related to the idea of energy transformation is sectoral decarbonization. And by the way, you may be thinking to yourself, what is all this crazy vocabulary? This glossary is horrible. And it's especially taxing, I think, for people that don't have English as their first language. And so we are very aware that we are using a lot of technical jargon that may not be in your everyday vocabulary. But to be honest, if arts, culture, and heritage is going to influence policymaking, we have to in part talk the language of climate policy. And so we are bravely using this vocabulary in hopes that it will make us all more familiar with it and easier for us to use. So sectoral decarbonization, we need to get the greenhouse emissions down from all the major sectors of the economy. And so I think to make the polling on this one standardized, what I'm going to do is ask you to type into the Slido, which sector of the economy do you think arts, culture, and heritage can most influence in terms of decarbonization? And some of the choices include food and agriculture, buildings, industry, tourism. The UK has identified transport as one of its clean road transport as one of its highest priorities for COP26, decarbonizing transport. So that raises things like creative mobility and how creativity can drive lower energy mobility. So I'm curious, what do you think is our highest and best use? Which sector can we help decarbonize the most? And by the way, I think we can decarbonize all of them. So this is a tough question, but you know, which of your children do you like the best? I'm excited that some of you are willing to brave the topic of tourism, which is a real challenge for us because culture and heritage relies so heavily on tourism, and tourism is such a great source of greenhouse gas emissions. So how do we help reimagine that is a key topic for us. Okay, these are great. I thought more people would say food, but I see a little bit about food waste. I agree with that. But tourism, construction, buildings, human behavior generally is great too. Yes, I mean, culture influences consumption and production patterns. So how do we promote a culture of frugality, of reuse, of stewardship? David, you want to move on? All right, we're not going to poll on this one in the interest of time, but you already heard from Matt Toombs that climate finance is a key theme of the UK presidency of the COP. And often in the culture sector, we're a little bit divorced, disconnected from the finance discussion. And yet then we wonder why we don't have any money for demonstration projects and for financing projects that showcase the cultural dimensions of climate action. So we're going to try not to let that happen in 2021 and keep a the face of the arts, culture, and heritage movement on the emerging global discussions about how to leverage more finance for climate mitigation and adaptation. David, next one. Okay, adaptation and resilience. Adaptation and resilience is another key theme of the UK presidency. This is a topic a lot of people in this group know about. In the SurveyMonkey surveying that we did already, adaptation and resilience was the #1 topic of interest to groups that answered the survey already. And so David, if you want to open the Slido polling, we're asking you the question, what word or short phrase do you think best describes the contribution of arts, culture, and heritage to adaptation and resilience in the face of climate change? Yes, I want us to do all these things. I want us to carry every one of these strategies to climate policymakers. That's why we have to keep growing the network. It's also funny how hard these are. I mean, it makes so much sense to learn from the past. And then I look at the climate planning from my own city and state. There's nothing about learning from the past in it, no matter how much you suggest it. So we know we have work to do. All right, these are all great. So David, why don't we yeah, there we go. Okay, nature-based solutions. This is another of the UK presidency's key themes for this COP26, and it builds on a key theme from COP25 under the Chilean presidency, where oceans was a priority theme. And I imagine oceans will continue to be a big topic at COP26. So the irony of the kind of global emphasis on nature-based solutions is in the framing of the theme, it sort of perpetuates this false dichotomy between nature and culture, which is something that largely, I think, good practice suggests one not do. And so perhaps it would seem ironic that we in the culture sector would have a lot to contribute to nature-based solutions, but of course it's because people are part of nature. And so there are a lot of interfaces between the culture sector and nature-based solutions, including cultural ecosystem services, traditional knowledge, a variety of things. So David, if you want to open the Slido polling, our question for you is, when it comes to the theme of nature-based solutions, what are key contributions, in a word or two, that arts, culture, and heritage make to nature-based solutions? yeah, I thought there would be a lot of activity on this one. And again, it's almost ironic because I hear all the time, oh, well, that's the one on nature, so you culture people don't need to show up. And I think, what? What? It's, these natural, so-called natural and cultural values are coexisting on the same landscape, as do humans exist with broader nature. And so whether it's protected area management or traditional knowledge, all these points, the humans are the vector for realizing the potential of nature-based solutions and cultural ecosystem services. Yes, I'm just nodding my head. I'm getting whiplash to all these suggestions. Yeah, time scales. I like that. You know, we in conservation are some of the only people that think on a multi-generational time horizon. Planning for 100 years, planning for perpetuity is nothing to us. And that's so important and so rare in climate planning. All right, let me give it a few more seconds, then we're going to move on. All right, another theme for the COP will be gender and human rights. And we had a good primer from Karima on the intersection between culture, rights, and climate change earlier in this annual General Assembly. And there's also the key question of gender and how that interfaces both with climate action and also who's bearing the impacts of climate change. At COP25, the UN launched a new gender action plan for gender and climate action, and that and human rights will undoubtedly be important at COP26. And so David, if you want to take us to the Slido polling. When it comes to addressing the human rights dimensions of climate change, when it comes to addressing gender inequality and the gender dimensions of climate action, what do folks see as the key contributions of arts, culture, and heritage? Where do our most valuable contributions lie? And if you could share your thoughts on those in just a word or a short phrase. I don't have the Slido up because I'm running the show, but I was going to type in people-centered. It's, you know, you heard Eunice, I'm trying to remember what Eunice's phrase was about how the climate messaging from the ministries of energy and infrastructure is so sort of technical and I forget what his word was, but not people-centered. And that's really a contribution we make. It's impossible for us in culture to talk about anything without talking about people. And so as soon as we start to talk about climate change, we're talking about people. And now we're talking about who's included and who's excluded, and equity and marginalization. And I think it's a real contribution we make to the climate discourse. Yeah, okay. David, you want to give it a few more seconds and then move on? All right, or 1 second. Another key dimension of climate action is climate education, training, public awareness, public participation, capacity building, you might call it. And that's always, it's an omnipresent dimension of climate work and climate action. It will take on extra significance at COP26 because the United Nations master plan for climate training and capacity building called ACE, Action for Climate Empowerment, is being revised and revisited. That's been a multi-year process ongoing. A few of you have been involved in that. I might especially note the work of Henry McGee, who's been carrying the torch for museums and culture in terms of contribution our sectors can make to climate empowerment education. And so this is a key theme for us. In the SurveyMonkey polling, this was the second most selected priority among the members who took the poll already, behind adaptation and resilience. And so David, if you want to open the Slido, the question is, when it comes to arts, culture, and heritage, what are our key contributions to climate education, training, empowerment, capacity building, public awareness? In terms of international policymaking, this is an interesting arena. This arena is dominated, and Henry could tell us even more about this, by educational institutions. And of course, the dividing line between cultural institutions and educational ones is a blurry one. Many organizations struggle to decide whether or not to define themselves as educational or cultural institutions. But nonetheless, the groups that tend to identify as cultural institutions are not so present in the global conversation about climate education and empowerment, which seems like a big missed opportunity. And so we have to find a way to show up here. So the question is, what do you think is our best argument, our best contribution to climate education and training, empowerment? Yes, lots of good contributions. I'm going to give it another second, David, and then move on. Okay, now we get to the topic of loss and damage. And I think Karima put it well when she observed that we're not going to be able to spare all culture, all traditions, all heritage from loss and damage from climate impacts. In fact, we're already experiencing the negative impacts of climate change now. Traditions are being disrupted, knowledge is being lost, heritage sites are being destroyed. And so how do we respond to loss and damage? And there's a particular variation on loss and damage, which is particularly devastating, and that is displacement, human mobility, be it individual mobility or displacement of whole communities, as when whole towns, villages have to be relocated because of climate impacts. There are a number of processes going on within the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, the Warsaw International Mechanism for Loss and Damage. There's a global task force on displacement that was commissioned by the Paris Agreement. And so there's a lot of policy making about how to quantify damage and loss, how to plan for it, how to deal with mobility and displacement, and not much contribution of a cultural dimension to it, even though to me, the cultural dimension is overwhelming. And so in the Slido, David, what we're asking you is on these painful topics of loss and damage, migration, displacement, where should we focus? What word or phrase describes the leading contributions of arts, culture, and heritage to this discourse and this policymaking? Okay, a lot of good ones, as you would expect, a lot of activity. David, do you want to give it another second and then move on? So we're not going to poll on this one, but I want you to know that we have in our sites the issue of the Paris Rulebook. Matt Toombs mentioned this, in particular negotiating the rules for Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. This is one of the biggest pieces of work that is not yet completed in terms of building out the Paris Agreement itself 5 years later. Our Article 6 are carbon trading markets. And you might ask yourself, well, what is the role of cultural heritage and financial markets to trade carbon credits? But these carbon credits come from projects. They come from infrastructure and development projects on the ground. And there has always been this idea that the projects ought to be subject to an environmental and social safeguards, that you should not be able to develop a project that is aimed at climate action, greenhouse gas reduction, but which damages ecosystems, biodiversity, indigenous peoples, and we might extrapolate to that more broadly, culture. So this is sort of like the environmental and social safeguards that go with underwriting of World Bank loans, for example. And so it's unresolved the extent to which environmental and social safeguards will be a dimension of the new carbon markets being set up on the Paris Agreement. And that's something that we will definitely want to engage with. And David, let's move on in the interest of time, because we're just now in the final minute or two. Just transition. So we know that in order to hold global warming well below 1.5 degrees Celsius, we need rapid and far-reaching change in every sector. We need change in the way we live and work and travel and grow food and build buildings and reuse buildings. And so it's hard to go through that amount of change without major disruption. And there is a real risk in that disruption that it will be unfair and inequitable, and that there will be vulnerable populations and marginalized communities and others who bear disproportionately the brunt of transformative climate action. And so the UN is focused on a just transition mechanism, a just transition to a green economy, a carbon neutral world. And the question is, what is the role of cultural heritage in a just transition? And the irony here is that so often when people are, when you focus on people that are demanding a just transition, like coal miners in Poland, for example, this is a recent example, they describe their concerns in cultural terms. They say they're losing their heritage, their in that case, the multi-generational livelihood of coal mining. So how does cultural heritage support a just transition? How do we bring a voice of equality in the process? How do we valorize the contributions of a carbon-based economy even while we support transition? How does traditional knowledge contribute to reskilling? I mean, there's a host of entry points. And so David, if you want to open the Slido poll, the question is, what is, in a word or two, what best describes a key contribution of arts, culture, and heritage to assuring a more just transition to a future regenerative green economy, green society? It's funny, in recent times, you see even more discourse about including in the just transition concept those who work in fossil fuels, not just coal miners, people work in oil and natural gas, whose jobs will change, their livelihoods will change, their families will change. And how about tourism? How about communities that are heavily dependent on carbon intensive tourism, which presumably is not a sustainable model in the future? Do those families and those communities partake of just transition benefits, reskilling, other techniques? Okay, I think we're just out of time, and so we'll have to end momentarily. And I apologize, David, is this our last one, or we have another?
This is the last one, yep.
Okay, so a minute over. I'm gonna wrap it up here, and thank you for your contributions. I'm gonna hopefully this has been both a primer in what are the key elements of the climate policy agenda, a chance for you to think a bit about it, but also interesting to see what our colleagues think and how they go about it. And our challenge, our opportunity in the Climate Heritage Network is to knit all this together into a coherent manifesto, a comprehensive policy agenda, and not just then share it amongst ourselves and publish it in the journals we read in, but venture out into the arenas of climate policy making at the COP and elsewhere to try to make our points and assure that the cultural dimensions of climate action and climate change are taken on board. And so I thank you so much for participating in this exercise. Please do take the SurveyMonkey survey if you haven't already. And of course, this is the heart of our work for the next year to the COP. And so much more about this. And with that, I think I turn it over to someone else. Me, yay.
Thank you, Andrew. And thanks everyone for your participation and your comments, both in the chat and in the SurveyMonkey. That was so fantastic and really important to getting everyone's thoughts and ideas. I'm gonna attempt to share my screen again. Let's see if I did that. Let's see. Here we go. We good? Can you see it?
We can.
Okay, so there we are next. I hope you're all now energized and go rush to complete the SurveyMonkey so we can get more of your thoughtfulness and really put together in working group 8 the things that we're doing and going forward to really make our lead into COP and the Madrid to Glasgow plan really important. So next we're going into the final session of the day. Give yourselves a big round of applause for sticking with us. And we are on to our last item of business. You've heard how a number of volunteer organizations and members are already doing so much with their time, their experience, and their donations. And we're at the point in our conversation where we are really talking about sustainability of the Climate Heritage Network. I always get really excited when we talk about these things because I think that it really shows how we all support in our everyday work the things that we're doing to connect each other. We have, during the past 2 years, been able to financially support the network through generous donations of organizations and individuals at both the San Francisco and Edinburgh programs. And we're so very grateful. We've been able to also support at a level far below the effort I think that's been given Ecomos and Andrew, our secretariat, for the rest of the year with those raised funds, the remainder of which we are using for this Climate by Culture Week. But like many organizations, raising funds in FY21 and beyond will be very important, particularly in times of COVID and further challenged by not being able to physically be together and understanding all that means. However, if we want to continue to keep our amazing momentum going in 2021, we really do need to think about how we're going to meet that financial gap in order to keep this momentum going. To that end, I'd like to reintroduce Andrew to talk about some plans we have about both membership and then a second pronged approach that we will have that I'll talk about in a minute about sponsorship opportunity. So Andrew, do you want to take over now and give us some information about what we put together for membership?
Yes, sure. So in 2019, we raised about, I was talking dollars and the money came in euros, but it was about $45,000 net in order to support the launch of the Climate Heritage Network. That was net. We raised it from the proceeds of the Edinburgh event, registrations and sponsorships. And that's what we've been using this whole year, 2020, to fund the organization. And we've done a lot. We stood up 7 of the 8 working groups that are taking forward the Madrid to Glasgow action plan. We stood up all 5 of the global regions of the Climate Heritage Network. We've supported countless events around the world. And of course, we have launched Culture by Climate and this Climate Heritage Week to help regain the momentum for arts, culture, and heritage organizations who are beleaguered with also dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. And as Julie said, in the course of 2020 and doing all that, as planned, we have used up the money that we raised in 2019. We always knew this was going to happen, and we had a very simple business model, which was to repeat in 2020 exactly what we did in 2019. We would have another global conference on arts, culture, and heritage and climate change. We would raise from registrations another amount of money, and then we would use that to fund the network in 2021. But of course, that business model has been scuttled, has been made impossible by the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we had to think of a different way to go about raising a similar amount of money in 2020 in order to fund the operations of the network in 2020. And the steering committee of the network deliberated about this over several meetings, and in the end settled on the idea of a voluntary membership fee. So the idea here is that we invite each Climate Heritage Network to make a cash contribution to pay a membership fee, but a voluntary fee in an amount that works for them. And so now I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to show you what this might look like. Julie, do you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. So this is a prototype web page that we would be taking live next week on the Climate Heritage Network webpage. And it invites all CHN members to become a sustaining member of the CHN by making a voluntary fee contribution. How much are we asking? We don't name any particular amount. This is a voluntary contribution, a function of what the network is worth to you and what your ability to give is. We have some target amounts for small organizations, €300, for medium organizations, €750, and for large organizations, €1,500. We don't define what small, medium, and large is, because again, these are some guidelines, but really in the end, it's up to the organization itself to decide. Our hope is that as a result of a voluntary membership fee campaign that we will launch a week from today on Monday, that between now and the end of the year and then continuing on into early January and February, enough of the members of the network will be moved to make enough voluntary contributions that we will raise roughly the amount that we raised in 2019. We're actually aiming to raise about $60,000 in 2019. We raised more like $45,000. We have a plan on how to use that money. We've learned a lot over the last year about what our members need in order to leverage more climate action. And so in addition to continuing the CHN Secretariat as we have over the last year, we would use the additional money for more member services to develop a line of policy briefs on climate issues that members can use, to create more social media assets to allow members to engage in the global digital conversation about climate change more easily, kind of like we have done with Culture by Climate, and also to build out the information sharing functionality of our webpage. We have a members only area, but it's not very functional right now. There's room for a listserv and other sharing devices. And so that's what we would do with the extra money. So next week, this webpage that you are seeing in a beta test right here would go live, and you will receive a proposal by email that your organization make a contribution. And then we will assess that as we go on to the end of the year and into the first weeks of 2021. This is really an alternate plan to our original business model, which has been scuttled by COVID-19. By the end of the year, we'll reassess, and if we're not succeeding in collecting the amounts we have, then we run the risk of the Secretariat not being able to continue as we get into the end of 2021, and then we will have to revisit it. But we feel confident that we've established the value proposition here and that the amounts are manageable for many organizations. And we hope this will result in sustainable funding for 2021, not unlike what we were able to do in 2019. And Julie, with that, I'll give it back to you.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm monitoring the chat, and there's lots of questions about, can people be invoiced? We should ask what members need also. Are there ways to contribute in kind? What is the payment method? all of those things are being developed. So we'll have more information available on the website. So stay tuned. But yes, 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 and yes, and yes, we're going to figure out any way possible to be able to accept your kind and generous offers to help sustain the Climate Heritage Network. Andrew, did you want to say something?
Well, a few of these I can answer. The payment method would typically be PayPal, although we can also invoice members and accept credit card or wire transfer amounts. Individuals can also support us. Donations to the network are tax deductible in France and the United States. So there's that. We can also benefit from in-kind contributions. And by the way, we most certainly have. The entire Culture by Climate webpage was donated, the development of it, by a CHN member of the city of San Antonio, Texas. And so in-kind donations are also welcome. We have increasingly some pretty specific needs, but we can work with you on that. Although we do also have to raise some cash money. And also I see the mention of grant funding. And I want to note that that is another avenue for funding the CHN. Several CHN members applied for grants and included the network itself as a grant partner. And we've taken on duties regarding those grants. And that has been a source of funding as well. So that's a model that can work. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you. As Andrew said, I also wanted to mention that there have been several and acknowledge several in-kind contributions, like Historic Environment Scotland and the San Antonio Office of Historic Preservation, Ewan League and the Building Environment Scotland and Hannah Flock of Historic England and the webinars they've been putting together. And thanks to my staff for the assistance they've been providing as well. So yes, we're always happy to help put everything together and help us to go forward. But as Andrew said, it's really important that we do raise some cash that will help us with, I think, our most important goal, which is to retain Andrew and Nikamos as our secretariat. And also we've had them on retainer this year at a very reduced level to equivalent to the effort that's actually been put forth. And so for absolute transparency, the steering committee has been discussing an increase to that amount to more accurately, but certainly not get us to the absolute level of effort that's been provided and that we all enjoy the benefits of. I'd like to introduce Shannon Shea Miller, who's the Director of Historic Preservation for the Office of Historic Preservation for the City of San Antonio, and ask Shannon to say a few words. She became the city's Historic Preservation Officer and Director in November of 2008, and under her leadership, OHP implements award-winning programs that include education and outreach, technical training, designation, design and development review, the city's vacant building programs, and initiatives in climate heritage, deconstruction, and living heritage. She has extensive experience in working in preservation at the local level in Tennessee and Texas, with a myriad of resources in heritage and sites and collaborative partnerships. Shannon, if you would mind saying a few words, we'd really appreciate it.
Yes, I believe I'm unmuted, correct? Yes, okay, good. Well, thank you so much, Julie. And as Julie said, I'm the Director of the Office of Historic Preservation here in San Antonio, Texas. And you know, we've been involved in the Climate Heritage Network from the beginning since the mobilization, and we've been a founding member, both our department and our city's Office of Sustainability. And you know, we've found the network really invaluable from the perspective of our own work here locally, finding new people that can be resources, looking to models across the world that we might not have ever come in contact to if it weren't for the Climate Heritage Network. We in San Antonio adopted our first climate action and adaptation plan last year. Oh, I'm sorry, my dog's freaking out. And we learned so much from the network and from examples around the world. And so I'm proud to have been a sponsor last year in Edinburgh and this year of the Culture by Climate. I'm sorry, she won't stop barking. And then we also are very happy to contribute as a voluntary contribution for membership. It's so important. And when you think about the growth of the network and how much breadth and reach that we have, if we all contribute even a small amount, those amounts add up so quickly. And so I would just encourage everyone to do what you can and don't feel like it might not be enough, because even small donations add up to a lot, and it will help us to continue into 2021 and beyond. And I'm sorry about my dog.
Life happens while we're talking, right?
But
Thank
yeah.
you, Shannon. So important. And the work that you all have done on the website's terrific for Climate by Culture, and helping connect us has been really important, and we greatly appreciate it. And I think that, to Shannon's point, no amount is too small. We've had lots of questions about other ways to donate and give. We've had conversations in the steering committee about applying for grants to help sponsor memberships for communities that might not be able to afford the membership or to join, so that we can make sure that our network is inclusive. So there's a lot of thought going on. If anybody is interested in any of those creative solutions and wants to participate, contact your regional co-chair or any one of us. No effort is too small, and every contribution is greatly appreciated. And for the state of California, it's very important. It's a top priority for us. Biodiversity, community engagement, and carbon sequestration are all dedicated top priorities that have been reinforced with our new Governor Gavin Newsom as recently as last week. The important work that the Climate Heritage Network is doing to connect global partners to achieve thoughtful solutions in a more rapid way is really one of the reasons why I'm allowed and supported to be participating in the network. To that end, I'm absolutely pleased to share with you that the state of California is providing support to the Climate Heritage Network in the amount of $9,999 US. Our hope is that this will bridge us through the first quarter of 2021, and that it will inspire others to support with membership, sponsorships, or any other way possible, so that we can keep our activities and our work going. I think that the progress that we have seen in the last couple of years has been so meteoric. We heard from Karime and Eunice and others about the importance of the connectivity, and Matt about how we can work together with COP and Aramina. And so I know that you are all on board, and I know that you all are here because you believe in our goals. And I just thank you so much for whatever you've done and for whatever you will continue to do to help us work together to infuse cultural heritage and climate action. More information will be on the website, so please stay tuned. And there were some other creative ideas that were in the chats. In the Survey Monkey, there's a note in there about other things that you might, other comments, and feel free to use that as an opportunity as well to let us know if there are things that you would like to engage with in the world of financial support and in-kind support for the network. Well, we've had a long day. We've come to the end of our time. Thank you all for your attention. I want to turn this over to Andrew, who will provide us with some closing remarks. And just on behalf of all of us on the committee that put the program together today, thank you so much for your time, your attention, and your continued good work. Andrew?
Well, thank you, Julie. I mean, I'm overwhelmed at the announcement of the funding from the state of California. It puts us 20% to our actual entire goal. So it's an auspicious beginning to that campaign, and thank you so much. We're out of time, and so I won't wax eloquent in closing remarks. Only to say that first, thank you to the co-chairs of this event, Julie, Polanco, and Ewan Hislop. Thank you to the staff at Historic Environment Scotland who made it possible. Thank you to the Built Environmental Forum Scotland and Ewan for hosting the Zoom call. Thank you to all the speakers. Thank you to our participants who hung with us through the entire annual general meeting. I want to encourage you to check out all the events in Climate Heritage Week 2020. They are spectacular, wowing. I'm in awe of what the event chairs have put together. Every event had a different CHN member as chairs and co-chairs, and they're amazing. So hit as many of them as you can over the next couple of days. And then just lastly to say, You know, we've heard repeatedly throughout this annual General Assembly that the world is not on pace to meet climate targets. Greenhouse gases are rising, not falling. Climate impacts are increasing, not decreasing. There is an ambitions gap and there is an emissions gap in the global response to climate change. And so many climate policy makers, I think, are frustrated. Citizens are frustrated. They think to themselves, we've been talking about climate action for years now. We've tried everything. I mean, what haven't we done? What is there left to do? Who's missing from the table? What new strategies could we pursue? And I think to myself, culture. Culture is a strategy you haven't tried. Arts, culture, and heritage have tremendous power to affect climate action, and we largely have not been integrated into climate action. And so as much as we want to be a part of climate action, I think the organizers of climate action need us too. They need our voice, they need our contributions, they need our skills, they need the power of arts, culture, and heritage. And so it's so critical that we bring that to them, that we lend our skills and expertise. And that's what each of you is doing through your participation in the Climate Heritage Network. And you cannot be thanked enough for doing that. And I think the world needs us. And so let's keep doing it, and onward and upward. And thank you again, and have a great day.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you very much from England.
Bye.
Bye. Bonne soirée à tous et à bientôt.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye. Bonne soirée.
Bonne soirée.
Deus, boa noite. Obrigada.